Welcome to tonight's meeting at the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continued relationship to this land. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid style and is streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Streams and recordings of Council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced, or republished without the permission of Council. If we experience any technical difficulties this evening, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. I remind attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the processes under which it operates, and must take direction from the Chair whenever called on to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and any statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive, or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of Council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of the Council. I also ask attendees to please not approach the councillors at their desks during the meeting. If you have any documentation, you can drop it off with the governance team near the door, and they will distribute it to the councillors. First item is apologies. We actually have all councillors present with the Deputy Mayor online, dialing in from Japan. Hello, Councillor Crawford. So everybody's here. On to the minutes of the previous meetings. The minutes of the Council meeting on the 21st of August 2024 have been circulated. Are there any questions of these minutes? If not, I'm looking for a motion to confirm these minutes. Thank you, Councillor Bond, and second by Councillor Sirakoff. Councillor Bond, or I'll just put in the vote. Sorry, there's no speaking to it. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, on to declarations of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in an item be discussed at tonight's meeting? CEO?
Through you, Mayor. I wish to declare a potential, perceived and general conflict of interest in relation to item 13.2, presentation of annual report, Palais Theatre Year 7. Due to my wife's employment and business interests, which sometimes see them as a competitor of Live Nation, who is the tenant at the Palais Theatre, I've previously declared this conflict and have no involvement in the preparation of the report. As it's a public report and I have no decision-making role, I will not leave the chamber for the item.
Thank you. Any further conflicts of interest? No. Move on to public question time and submissions. Under Council's governance rules, public questions can only be asked about items not on the agenda. Therefore, public questions will be referred to an officer for a response. If you're speaking to an item on the agenda tonight, a councillor may wish to take up your question at when the item is being considered. We have a mix of virtual and in person. Get to my list. Do we have our first person? Okay. In general, when I call on you, we have about 21 people addressing the council tonight. Any blue forms? About 21 people tonight. So it's going to be 2 minutes each. I'll need you to say your name and your suburb, and then we'll have 2 minutes. I have a clock and a buzzer back here that you'll hear very loud and clear when your time's up. But first I call upon James Newberry, member for Brighton, joining us online and speaking to item 7.1, the petition for sporting future of Elwood Park. James, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, councillors, for having me. I am here to speak about item 7.1 and the need for an upgrade to the pavilion at Waddy Watson Oval. Many of you councillors will know that it's an issue that I've been fighting for and the community's been fighting for many years. The pavilion is not female friendly, and we all have heard stories of girls being walked in on by men or vice versa because the pavilion isn't fit for purpose. When the pavilion first opened, there were 880 members using it. Now there's over 4,000. There were 21 teams. Now there's 72. There were no girls teams with the St Kilda City Club. Now we've got 10. So the usage has changed, but the pavilion hasn't. And we know of so many instances where girls have been, frankly, put in horrible positions because the pavilion is not fit for purpose. We need to take action. At the last election, my party committed to funding to work with council for an upgrade. Unfortunately, we weren't successful, and though I can't promise tonight another commitment at the next state election, I can assure you I'll be fighting for it. I think with council elections coming up and Macnamara basically being the most marginal seat in Australia, now's the opportunity to try and get money to make this upgrade happen. We need to work with local clubs, work with the local community, and I commend the club members who've started a petition. I've got a commitment to work with them on building on that and putting out a community petition myself to make sure the community is very aware of the need. And I say to councillors, please, let's not kick this can down the road any longer. We need action now.
Thank you, James. And is he still there? For the record, name and suburb, please.
James Newbury.
Suburb. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to go into the room. We have Damien Ross speaking to item 7.1, the petition sporting future of Elwood Park. Hello. How are you, Damien? Is the red light on for the microphone there? No, I think they're going to come and turn it on for you, and you can just leave it on. It'll stay on for the remainder. Okay. Name, suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
Yep, Damien Ross, Elwood. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the Elwood Park Sporting Precinct and Pavilion. Elwood Sporting Precinct is home to 7 tenancy clubs for the summer and winter sports, which include St Kilda City Junior Football Club, Elwood Senior and Junior Soccer Clubs, Elwood Cricket Club, St Kilda Celt Soccer Club, St Kevin's Gaelic Football Club and Elwood Auskick Junior Community Program. Collectively, we have over 4,000 members and participants, which represents the highest participation user numbers of any local sporting facility, not just in the city of Port Phillip, but arguably across the southern metropolitan area. I'm here today on behalf of all the aforementioned clubs, tenancy clubs of Elwood Park, to present a document that we have developed in close consultation together after forming a subcommittee of key stakeholders in 2022. Whilst Elwood Park Pavilion was last developed in 2009, it is inadequate to cater for the growing needs of the community sport in our area of Port Phillip. We have a building that did not anticipate the growth, in particular a huge increase in junior girls and women's sport. All clubs, especially our junior teams, team sport numbers across the code have grown from 700 members or participants and members in 2009 to over 4,000 in 2024. For example, the St Kilda City Junior Football Club had 8 boys teams, no girls in 2009, and now has 27 teams in 2024, which includes 11 girls teams. On any weekend in winter, you'll see both AFL football and soccer played across all playing fields, which is 2 ovals and 3 soccer pitches. On these busy Sundays, we have thousands of participants and spectators, and between 12 and 16 teams needing to utilise 4 very small change rooms, often at the same time. It's not only practical, it creates tension for member clubs and most distressingly creates a safety issue for our participants, particularly females. James has just highlighted one particular instance. There are...
Thank you, Damien. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. That was 2 minutes. However, we have a question from a councillor. Please keep it brief since we have so many people.
Very brief. Thanks for your presentation, Damien. I'm actually umpiring a football grand final at your ground on Sunday. There are several young women as part of my umpiring team. Do I have to share common facilities, or will there be separate facilities for the men and the women in that umpiring team?
Thank you for Mr. Martin. But so we do not have that, and so all our officials have to share the same room, be it female or male.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll have to move on to the next speaker, but appreciate you coming down tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate your support. I hope that you'll consider this important community initiative. And the newly elected council must consider this.
Okay, I need you to please stop. Thank you. I call upon Richard Henley speaking to 7.2, the joint letter, the objection to the proposed lane reduction on Park Street. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Name, suburb, and 2 minutes. Thank you.
Richard Henley. I live in the Hallmark building in Albert Road. It's the Gateway Ward. There's a proposal for the change regarding the bike lane on Park Street. This has been considered without any reopening of the main road, and therefore the traffic flows that are going to come down the main road, which, if people remember, 5 years ago used to go down to St Kilda Road or down Albert Road. The Albert Road pathway is now being blocked off. So there are decisions being made without anyone knowing how much traffic is going to flow up Park Street into Domain Road and down Domain Road into Park Street. So how a decision can be made, and Vic Roads couldn't possibly guess, given the changes of all the roads around that area, what the traffic flows are going to be. So making decisions now to me seems totally illogical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon David McGowan, speaking to 7.2, the joint letter as well. Hello, David. Oh, you got documents. Thank you. Right. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please. If the red light's on, it should be on already.
It's on?
Is the red light on?
Yes.
Then you're good to go. Thank you.
David McGowan, St Kilda Road, Melbourne. I speak in support of the joint letter objecting to the proposed road design change in Park Street at the approach to St Kilda Road. The officer response to the letter is deficient in a number of ways. First and foremost, it's alarming that there has been zero community consultation in relation to this design change. Secondly, the major role Park Street plays in allowing traffic to flow from west to east across Kingsway and St Kilda Road appears to be ignored. A single lane will cause a bottleneck for through traffic, as left-turning vehicles cannot move until bike and pedestrian movements have ceased. Thirdly, it's wrong to focus on how the intersection has been functioning as a single lane arrangement since late 2022, without recognising the facts which have and will have an impact on traffic flow. For 5 years, Domain Road has been shut, so no through traffic from the west. At the right turn at Park Street at St Kilda Road has also been stopped for much of the Anzac Station build. Prior to the Anzac Station, cars were able to use Elwood Road to turn right into St Kilda Road and also to manoeuvre to gain access to Domain Road. This access is no longer possible either, and use of Park Street as a through road crossing of of Kingsway and St Kilda Road will increase dramatically. The added vehicle flow that will result from the built form density increase yet to occur in sub-precinct 2 also appears to have been forgotten. Bus movements are suggested as a driver of this design change, but there is no bus route in Park Street. Is an occasional bus a reason to cause a traffic bottleneck in a major through road? A left turn lane can still be provided.
Thank you, David. I'll have to stop there. We've got a question from Councillor Pearl.
Yes. When did you first find out about this, and what opportunity for consultation did you have?
There was a letter distributed dated the 1st of August. I think and delivered to my mailbox. A formal letter, not an email. I probably got it 3 or 4 days later, and there has been no consultation since the council decision in 2022 on this project with the community.
Thank you. I now call upon Betty J, speaking to item 7.2, the joint letter as well. Hello, Betty. Hi. We'll be hearing from you multiple times tonight, so let's just do this one right now.
Thank you.
For 2 minutes, please. Name, suburb.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, councillors. I support the petition and the gentleman that just spoke with great detail about what's going on. I think the way that we all really feel down there, because I live on Park Street and I'm immediately affected, is we don't have any power to make change down there. Council doesn't think it's their problem. They think it's a state government Vic Roads issues, but unfortunately none of us have them on speed dial. There's many people in this building that do have the power to help us and advocate on our behalf with the relevant authorities. We're frustrated, disappointed and feel like we've been forsaken in the process. No one in my building even got a letter. I wouldn't have known unless, the group that I'm a member of didn't inform everyone, so we're directly affected and weren't even told about the decision. I personally, in my building, we find that there's zero understanding and zero consultation of the residents in any of this, mass growth that's happened in the Domain precinct. whether it be not able to turn into our own car parks, into our own streets, or making the streets just way too narrow for what and who you're letting down there. We really need some help, and we need some common sense decisions just to help us, live in our own areas. So please, have a good look at what the guys are proposing and come down and experience it for yourself. So thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I call upon Jan Councillor speaking to 11.1, the Port Phillip EcoCentre funding agreement. Hello, Jan. Name, suburb, 2 minutes.
Jan Cossa, Middle Park. Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm President of the Port Phillip EcoCentre and would like to firstly thank councillors and officers for their ongoing partnership and continuing support of the work of the EcoCentre, and for your contribution through your 2024-25 budget to our work, and your considered support for another 5-year funding agreement, 24 to 29. This 5-year funding agreement will provide the foundational support for the EcoCentre to operate. Importantly, we are then able to leverage, based on previous results, a further 70% of our total funding through a range of grants, philanthropy, gifts and fee-for-service. This makes us a sound strategic investment and value for money. Importantly, a number of our EcoCentre programs and outcomes align with Council's strategy, your 10-year strategy, and we directly support the Act and Adapt Sustainability Environmental Strategies plan and implementation 23 to 28 through a number of programs and activities that we deliver. This 5-year agreement in our new EcoCentre that's almost built will enhance the opportunities for our community to meet together, to learn and to work, to mitigate and adapt to global warming, which we've experienced in the last week, strive to protect our biodiversity and build a more sustainable future for our children and grandchildren. We look forward to working with you over the next 5 years. We have much to do.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
I call upon...
And Mayor, may I be excused? I have a 7 o'clock meeting for which I'm late, but I really needed to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Now I call upon April Seymour, speaking to item 11.1, the Port Phillip EcoCentre funding agreement. Hello, April.
Hello, thank you, councillors. April Seymour, East St Kilda, and I'm speaking tonight as Executive Officer of the EcoCentre. Thank you for supporting the Port Phillip community, really, in the endorsed council plan and budget, including a new renewed funding agreement, partnership with the EcoCentre and weekend trial operations. We're sure this is going to deliver even more outcomes for clean, green, healthy and connected neighbourhoods, parks and beaches. You are a skilled and knowledgeable council. You know the science on climate, that there's increasing heat, floods and sea level changes in our own city, and you know that the Port Phillip residents are concerned and very keen for action. You know that last year the EcoCentre worked with over 89,000 service users across programs, volunteering, community inquiries and digital resource uses. And you know, many of you personally, that hundreds, possibly thousands of residents and local groups have written in support of EcoCentre expansion over the last decade, describing the EcoCentre as vital to identity of place for being a Port Phillip resident. And you know that we've partnered with Council since 1999. What is less known, and I'd like to reiterate, is about the rigour and integrity of our partnership and how carefully we design and continuously evaluate EcoCentre activities to ensure value for Council, community and environment. And that includes independent evaluation about our conduct of our work, the scientific merit and impact. Activities are never undertaken or renewed for the sake of it, but based on measurable results, regularly reported to Council, including 6 weekly meetings. Council also commissioned an independent economic analysis of our work, and thank you. This allowed the EcoCentre to understand in quantitative terms that since 1999 we've contributed $70 million economic and social value for our community, or a 1,590% return on council's investment over that period. So in this context, a climate crisis, strong community interest, track record for value on council's investment, we thank you.
Thank you, April. I call upon Ian Gray. Ian Gray is also speaking to 11.1. Ian?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. My name's Ian Gray. I'm the Vice President of the Port Phillip EcoCentre. I'm a resident of St Kilda. As Jan Costa and April have noted, we've enjoyed a productive relationship with the City of Port Phillip, a very productive one, and we thank the City for that. It's been strong and long-standing ongoing support. It's a very exciting time for us right now. You've heard enough, I think, from Jan and from April about statistics and figures and value and investment. All I really want to say is that it's an exciting time. Given the advent of the new building, it's almost completed. We are receiving many requests for projects that can be done by using it and partnering with us in it in the future. It's very close to be able to offer its full potential, and we look forward to an ongoing, effective and productive relationship with the Council as we expand our programs. And finally, I want to invite you to join us tomorrow as the EcoCentre co-hosts the annual School Sustainability Festival. Many of you will be aware of it. It's taking place in this building. It's a great festival. It's an inspiring festival. I saw it for the first time last year. It's been going for many, many, many years, and it's really a remarkably impressive festival in which students lead other students in teaching effectively about how to teach and learn about environmental improvement, celebrating biodiversity, demonstrating their environmental leadership achievements. So that's what happens over the course of that excellent festival. It happens here in this building, and 25 schools and 250 students will be participating in that here tomorrow. So I invite, on behalf of the EcoCentre, I invite all of you to attend it if you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, and I'll be there tomorrow. Next, I call upon Rhonda Small, and I have you down for two items. The first one is 13.1, the governance arrangements for Housing First and Port Phillip Housing Trust. If you can start with that, 2 minutes on that, and then you'll go on to the 14.2 notice of motion. Is that all right?
Thanks, Mayor, but I don't need the 4 minutes. I'll try and do it in just over 2.
Love it. All right, go for it.
So if I can just also start by noting that this is the last council meeting for the current council and acknowledging the service that you've all provided our community as serving councillors. If you're not standing again, best wishes for future endeavours, and if you are, then best wishes for your campaigns. And thanks to the officers for their service to the community in the last term. So I'll speak briefly to both the 13.1 governance arrangements Housing First and Port Phillip Housing Trust, and 14.2 the notice of motion, Councillor Nyaguy, the housing emergency. It probably won't surprise any of you that I'm speaking to these two items, given the number of times I've come to this chamber during this term of council and previous ones to advocate for stronger partnerships between council and our dedicated community housing providers in Port Phillip, and for increasing council's investment in community housing and in the support that it provides to renters in our city. First, 13.1. I note that the legal advice provided to Council on the governance arrangements for the Port Phillip Housing Trust has been deemed confidential, so I'd just appreciate an explanation of that when the item's being discussed. But given the summary provided, it would seem the advice found the arrangements to be suitable, so long as any difficulties regarding conflicts in role for councillors appointed to the Trust Board are effectively managed. The advice also seemed to suggest that information sharing processes between Council and Housing First could ensure Council stays appropriately informed about the Trust. And it would seem to me that this points to the need for a strong and trusting partnership and a collaborative relationship between Housing First and Council, which is the least we in the community would expect to occur. Second, 14.2. I simply want to say that this motion goes to the heart of what I and others have long been advocating for in relation to the extreme lack of affordable and secure rental housing in Port Phillip. So I encourage you to recognise the important role Council can and should play and to vote tonight in favour of stronger action. Many in the community will applaud you if you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. All right, next I call upon Leslie Rosenblatt, joining us online. Do we have Leslie online? Yeah. Speaking to item 14.2, the notice of motion from Councillor Nyaguy about the housing emergency. Hi, Leslie, can you hear us? Oh, we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Name,
Yes.
suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
Leslie Rosenblatt, St Kilda. I'm speaking in support of Councillor Nyaguy's motion, and I endorse all of the aspects of his motion and hope that the council will not just pay attention to it, but will actually welcome and accede to Councillor Nyaguy's thoughtful compilation of needs that the council could address. I remind the council that your Places to Live estimated that the current shortfall of affordable dwellings in the city numbers 7,000 is the current shortfall, and it's estimated to increase to 11,000 by 2041. And there are 3,500 households currently in severe housing stress. The situation has only got worse since Places to Live was written. I would like to recommend, in addition to the issues that Councillor Nyaguy has recommended, that there be a tenants' week that the council promotes, like the Senior Citizens Week in the city of Port Phillip. Making up 49% of the residents, there needs to be more inclusion and recognition of the lives of the tenants in this city. And I would also recommend a tenants advisory committee, a bit like the one that you've got for older people and for multiculturalism and the LGBTQI plus minorities in the city. Why not have a tenants advisory committee that represents
Thank
the
you,
49%?
Leslie. I'm going to have to cut you off there just to be fair for everybody, but thank you very much for your submission.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll call upon Barney Moore, speaking also to 14.2. Hello, Barney. Name, suburb, and 2 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My name is Barney Moore and I'm a resident of St Kilda. I want to add some personal reflections to this discussion about item 14.2. I've spoken with neighbours and friends who've been priced out of our community due to skyrocketing rents. Some have faced increases of 10, 20 or even 30%, often more than once. These aren't just statistics, they represent people who've had to make a heartbreaking decision, really, to leave the city of Port Phillip, a place that they've called home for years. I personally know of business owners who once lived just down the road from their shop and practices, now priced out of the area. One trader I know moved all the way to Mornington and now has to commute in. People often talk about the ripple effects that a crisis like this would have, but I would describe it more as a wave. It's a force that's really swept through the community and it's dislodged residents and severely impacted some local businesses. Again, several business owners have told me that their revenue is down as much as 50%. And when 50% of your community is renting, you don't have to be a mathematician, and I certainly am not one, to see some correlation between the increases in rent and the downturn in some businesses. I believe this motion isn't just about allocating funds, but it's about standing up for our community, and it's a declaration that we see the pain and struggle and that we're here to help. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Barney. Just for the record, Stephen Pennells, if you're listening in, we are waiting to hear from you. You're registered to speak, but we haven't gotten into contact yet, so please contact governance. So I'll move on virtually. We have Charlie Beckley. Yes? Hi, Charlie. You're also speaking to item 14.2. Can you hear us? Charlie, you might need to unmute. All right, looks like you
Thank
have.
you, Mayor.
Oh, great. Now I can hear you. Name, suburb in 2 minutes, please, Charlie.
Thanks, Mayor and Councillors. My name's Charlie Beckley, CEO of Southport Community Housing Group. Actually live in Castlemaine but work in South Melbourne. I'd like to support the motion of the item 14.2 at this evening's council meeting and express our support. Southport has been providing housing options in the city of Port Phillip for over 40 years. And our defining purpose is to manage, create social rental housing options for single adults and young people who have faced homelessness and social exclusion. The significant rise in homelessness and severe rental stress is dire and only predicted to get worse without considered and coordinated responses from all levels of government. The issue requires council to play, as it historically has, a pivotal role. So we encourage council to look beyond business as usual and retake the position of leadership in driving localised responses to the current issue. And lastly, we support the outlined measures in the motion as necessary, urgent and responsible steps for council to respond to the current housing rental crisis. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Charlie. I call upon Penny Nicol, joining us online as well, speaking to item 14.2, the notice of motion. Penny, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Hi, Penny. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Penny, Nicol and Elwood. So I first wanted to start by just saying how heartwarming it was to see the comprehensive submission for the Elwood Park Pavilion and the people who spoke to it, James and Damien. This is exactly where I'd love to see our ratepayers' money go to. It's a really huge community project. So it was really good to hear that. I'm speaking to 14.2. As a ratepayer, I'm dismayed to see this motion brought back to the table. So much council time and money, ultimately our ratepayers' money, has been spent debating issues that are firmly state government responsibility, as this one is. Many hours will now be wasted listening to reasons why local government should also get involved and, worse, spend more money and time on it. As someone who is doing it very tough paying off a mortgage at the moment, as I'm sure others are, I'm tired of being demonised as a wealthy landowner. Even worse, landlords in this area who are also demonised as ruthless for daring to raise rents as is their right. There's a newsflash here. When state government introduced a temporary pandemic tax onto existing land tax payable, effectively doubling to quadrupling what they now pay, then guess what needs to happen to rents? Combine this with 13 rate rises and you have a perfect storm, but no one ever seems to talk about that. The motion to freeze rates didn't even make it as far as this motion. There's far more support for that. There is. We, the residents, are tired of frivolous pet projects that are often a state-responsible project being put on this agenda. It just feels like a political stunt right on election time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Penny. I call upon Justin Halliday, speaking to 14.2 as well. You in the room? Hello. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Councillors and Council Officers. As the last council meeting, I'm just wishing to thank you all for your service over this term of council. I'm here to voice my support for motion 14.2. Housing affordability has never been worse, and these rental increases are sucking the blood, the money out of the renters and leaving them right on the risk, on the edge of homelessness. When the new council is elected, there are 4 things we need to focus on. 1 is continuing our investment as a council in social housing that has ended under this council. 2, using our new powers to manage the impact of short stay accommodation on the city of Port Phillip and get these back into the long-term rental market. Number 3 is bring forward the Carlisle Street structure plan that is scheduled after Fitzroy Street so that we can identify housing opportunities around Balaclava Station. And the last one, number 4, is ensure that densification is equitably shared across our established suburbs and not just put into St Kilda and Balaclava and St Kilda East. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, Betty J, come on back up for item 14.2, the notice of motion, please. Name and suburb again, 2 minutes.
Betty J, South Melbourne. In my haste, I've left some papers at home, so bear with me. I am speaking to the housing 4.2 as an objector. Little story. Last week I got my car serviced in South Melbourne. Chris at Midas. He also let me know when I was there that he rents a little concrete warehouse, as most mechanics do. His rates went up $5,000. That's 25% increase for him this year. So the council decided that this concrete block that he rents went from $4 million to $5 million in value in a year. What this means is that he can't absorb this, so he will naturally pass that.
Can you pause real quick, Betty?
Through you, Mayor, just to clarify, the council doesn't determine the valuation. That's done through the valuation general.
Good information. Thank you. So we don't have control over how much it's valued. That's done independently outside of the council, but it does impact. So if you can keep going, please.
Look, it does get a bit confusing when it's a 2.7 or 3.5 rates cap and all of a sudden it's a 25% increase. I don't really understand.
That's right. If you can keep going.
So what this means is the more rates we charge, the more that our costs will increase, our costs of living. He can't absorb that $5,000. He'll pass that on to the consumers. And this is exactly what happens with the rental properties for the residents. Landlords do run, they balance their books. Some of them are investing in it. The rates go up and the tenants will absolutely be forced to absorb that. When council increases the rates, when they increase parking and they increase the business rates, it does make it hard for businesses to survive, people to survive and a community to thrive. It is not our responsibility to pay people's rent. I wish it was. I'd put my hand up first. But what we can do to help the housing is absolutely freeze the rates going forward and tighten our belts so everybody's cost of living is alleviated. It's a community problem and a community response. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Do we have Nikita, the next person online? Okay. Now we're going to move on to questions for council. These ones I will refer to an officer. For the first one online, we have Nikita Jain submitting a question to council. Nikita, can you hear us?
I can. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Name, suburb, and 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Nikita Jain. I'm in St Kilda, and my question is not more of a question. It's more of a request. To have a crossing supervisor on Fitzroy Street on the other side of St Kilda Park Primary School. That's towards the Kebab Hut side. So we have a crossing supervisor towards Woolies, which we all know. But just on the other side of the street is having a lot of complex crossing for kids and also the age parents. If I see them crossing in the morning, trams coming in from both directions, and I think it's 6 or 8 lanes traffic for the kids to go, and also there's a free giveaway which goes towards the Lakeside Drive, where there is no control of traffic when kids are crossing the road towards the school. So I think it would be a great idea to have a crossing supervisor there for the safety and, for kids for them to be encouraged to be walking towards school, because school annually holds the day where they are encouraged to walk or scoot or bike towards the school. But also we, at the same time, we need to make sure that when they're doing so, they are safe and they're doing so. So it's like more of a request. So I'm not sure how many crossing supervisors you can provide to a school, but I did speak with school and principal was very much in agreement to this, and he said that yes, that's a valid point, and we should have a supervisor there. So what's the process actually? I mean, how to have it, and is there a cap on it that this many supervisors can be there near a school, or how does it go?
Thank you, Nikita. Can I just clarify, you're talking about across Fitzroy Street at Princess Street to Lakeside Drive, is that correct? That's where Kebab Hut is?
Yes, please. So from the Kebab Hut side towards the Lakeside Drive. So that is where the kids would come and go to and from the school.
Yeah, I've just pulled it up. Thank you very much. I'm going to refer that over to the officer. Fiona, are you able to help? I have it pulled up. Do you see the intersection she's talking about? It's one block up from the school, but on the corner there of the park. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. Council supports the need for people of all ages and abilities to travel safely in our municipality, and particularly school children. Council collaborates directly with schools as part of our Healthy Tracks and to Schools program, which is designed to establish safe walking routes, encourage active transport and improve road safety for school-aged children. In 2018, Council officers worked with St Kilda Park Primary School on this initiative, and that identified 4 safe walking routes and infrastructure improvements, and as a result of that, improvements occurred in 3 locations. The Department of Transport and Planning's Crossing Supervisor program sets out criteria and the required pedestrian demands for a crossing supervisor to be subsidised by the state government. Council officers will arrange for a pedestrian count to be conducted in Term 4, and this data will be used to assess the sites suitable for a future crossing supervisor in consideration with the program's warrants, available funding and the ability to staff the position.
Thank you, Fiona. I now have a question from Janet Hamilton. Hello, Janet. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Port Melbourne. My concern relates to the safety of pedestrians in public spaces. I'm one of the 1/3 of women, 1/3 over 50 years, who have osteoporosis. I don't know what the stats are for men, but I'm sure it's still concerning. Many of these women and men are not aware that they've got osteoporosis. And as an example, according to my doctor and test results, I have an 11% chance of serious injury if I'm knocked over or fall over. I and others like me are at risk from any of the following obstacles, which are now, regardless of current restrictions and regulations, regularly using City of Port Phillip public footpaths, grounds and facilities. These are manual and e-powered scooters, skateboards, bicycles, wheelchairs and dogs, both leashed and unleashed. I'm a taxpayer and a ratepayer, and I vote in council elections. I believe the council has the legal duty of care to protect and the financial responsibility to support pedestrians injured in public spaces. I'm not sure how people can get compensation from anyone who knocks them over. So my question is, how does the City of Port Phillip legally protect and financially support a resident who is injured on council public space by any of the following: a mobile scooter, bicycle, skateboard, wheelchair or dog?
Thank you, Janet. Fiona, are you able to answer that one?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for reaching out and raising your concerns regarding your experience as a pedestrian and living with osteoporosis in this environment. In relation to mobile scooter, bicycle, skateboards, I can advise that riders must obey road rules outlined in Vic Roads and Transport Victoria's websites. They're available at the websites, and we can provide you with those links, and we can provide anyone with those links. If bikes, scooters or skateboards are being ridden unlawfully, you can report them to Crime Stoppers or the Police Assistance Line. I also note there is a requirement for operators of shared e-bikes and e-scooters to hold public liability, personal injury and comprehensive third-party insurance. If an individual is injured whilst on council footpath, grounds or facilities, they are able to submit a formal request for compensation. These forms are available on request, and all requests received are fully investigated and each matter is considered on its merits. If payment of compensation is considered appropriate, a fair and reasonable offer of settlement is made with the aim of achieving to resolve. A payment of compensation is not considered appropriate, a full explanation is provided, and it usually takes approximately 8 weeks following the investigation to get a response. In relation to dogs, our domestic animal management plan outlines how we will manage dogs and cats within our boundaries and how we minimise dogs creating a nuisance where they need to be on lead and how they minimise the risk of attacks of dogs on people and animals. And this includes patrolling and enforcing dogs on lead restrictions. If someone is injured in a dog attack or rush, Council can undertake an investigation that may result in enforcement activities, including official warning, infringement, notices to comply and court prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon Frank Artuso, submitting a question to Council. Hello, Frank.
Good evening. I'll respect and try to stick to 2 minutes.
Sure. Name, suburb, and then you can get started, please.
Frank Artuso, Albert Park. Mayor, councillors, officers, thank you for your service. Question: is the local government Victoria candidate training truly of a sufficient standard? A councillor's role is to perform fiduciary duties as an institutional community director, undertaking 1, governance matters, 2, competing financial and budget considerations, 3, city strategic planning, 4, planning submissions, 5, an array of council services, 6, enabling a crisis management strategy if required, 7, teamwork within council, other levels of government, non-government, community groups and the private sector, 8, multitude of reports, reading and analysis, formulating opinions, decision-making implementation, 9, councillor duties outside the chamber, and 10, maintaining resilience, mental well-being as a citizen and councillor. The online training, the online candidate training, which I've left the paper for you, states you are encouraged to attend at least 1 council meeting to see how decisions are made, or watch the live stream of a council meeting online via the council website. How do I respond as a voter to this standard? The practice of commitment to public service begins with fundamental training. Staying in chambers for the entire evening demonstrates first principle commitment. There should be no early mark home to this tutorial lesson. Virtuous manifestos is not the question here. Demonstrating the virtue of discipline to the process is. Candidates should engage their minds with all council issues, identifying where they need to build capacity, capabilities and performance, not just their interest. Online viewing cannot replace the resilience needed to stay focused for up to 4 hours in this chamber, maintaining a nimble, agile and attentive mind on every topic before chambers. Councillors, current councillors, will you lobby the state government to strengthen their meagre encouragement as it currently discounts the core practice? Per Governance Rule 51.7, I welcome the questions.
That was very good, right in the 2 minutes. Joanne McNeill.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. The mandatory candidate training delivered by Local Government Victoria was updated in July 2024, and it includes additional information for candidates to better understand the role of councillor and a greater emphasis on the strategic nature of the role and time commitment required. Council's role is to make sure that we deliver a robust mandatory councillor induction program, which has also been enhanced this year, and we aim to give the incoming councillors the necessary skills and information to perform their roles effectively as a collective. We're partnering really closely with the Municipal Association of Victoria, as well as which held a Stand for Council session on the 31st of July to talk through what is the experience of councillors, what will they expect. So there's a lot of things in place to support councillors, in addition to potential councillors who are standing, as well as any other actions they potentially choose to do themselves.
Thank you. CEO, you want to add?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Frank. I think you raised some really valid points. My experience has been that new councillors coming in can often be a bit surprised about the requirements, and it takes a bit of adjustment. We are focusing a lot on the training requirements as councillors come into council. The government has put a bit more emphasis on training for candidates as well. There wasn't as many requirements in the past, but some of your feedback around that we can take back to Local Government Victoria as part of our ongoing review processes. So thank you.
Yes, it was all about the nominees.
Yes, got it. Thank you very much. I call upon Lauren Sherson submitting a question to council. Hello, Lauren. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Lauren Sherson, Albert Park. Good evening. Can Council please explain the extent of delegation given to the CEO during caretaker mode and that would previously belong to the 9 councillors?
Thank you. Joanne?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. The CEO's delegations can be viewed on Council's website in detail. Council will consider tonight changes to planning delegations to enable the CEO or the delegate to determine planning applications to these delegations so that we can continue to meet statutory obligations during the caretaker period. However, there are very specific limitations to these delegations, so it's a very specific delegation that's applied. And importantly, the election period policy of Council, which is also available on the website, contains much more information on what can and can't be done during caretaker, and it specifically limits the kinds of decisions that can be made.
Thank you. All right, one more speaker, but you got multiple questions. Betty J, come on down again. All right, I note that you have several questions, and I've got a couple of officers to refer to. So let's... we've got a copy here, so if you want to run through them.
Where do you want to start?
Question 1.
Question 1 is...
You'll need to say name and suburb again, please.
Good. I can answer that one easy. Betty J, Park Street, South Melbourne. My first question 1 is there is a heritage tree in somebody's backyard on Bank Street. The neighbour, Carol, has asked me to do some investigating on her behalf. She wants to know who is responsible for the heritage tree's care, who is responsible for the damage caused to neighbouring properties, and who is the steward of this tree. She loves the tree. It's 160 years old. It's an Algerian oak that was brought down from the Botanical Gardens. So, she has the privilege of sharing it with her neighbour. It's in her neighbour's yard. But Carol has incurred a lot of costs and will continue to. The tree will hopefully be around longer than anyone here.
Great. Can we just stick to the questions so we can get... And then if you can keep going to the next one, please, and then we'll get the response in total, please.
You don't want to go one response at a time?
If you could keep rolling in, please.
Okay. Some residents of St Vincent's Place, Albert Park, essentially St Vincent's and Merton Street, that corner, would like to know the frequency of their FOGO pickup. One street says it hasn't been picked up for weeks, if not months. Question 2. There's a tree on the nature strip at St Vincent's Place, corner of Merton, Albert Park. It's cracked Gary's fence. Who is also the steward of this tree and what can be done to further stop the damage? Gary also wants to know about the zebra crossing that was promised in 2022. Where is that crossing leading from one side of the street to the park? Question 3. There's an abandoned building in Palmerston Crescent around the street from me. Recently, there's some, I've sort of left it for a few days, wondering if it was short term, but some drug addicts are camping there in the building. There's a bicycle garage forming with at least 6 bikes to date being collected. This is obviously a complicated issue, but what can council do to both help the rough sleepers, the residents, and possibly even the owners of the bikes?
And if you can ask the last one, please.
And the last one is a little bit longer.
Is that the rubbish truck going down Danella Lane?
Oh, yeah. So I went down to Flirty Flowers in Balaclava the other day, spoke to Viva about her attending the Lights walk down Carlisle Street, thought she'd be interested as a trader. She actually got quite triggered and upset. She let me know that she wasn't concerned about front lights out the front on the street. She'd been asking council numerous times for lights out the back for safety. In a Great World security camera in Halfway, some lights. Every night there's someone either defecating, breaking in or damaging her property. She's scared to walk out there at night, works really early, late at night. She's also upset that the rubbish trucks won't come down Dianella Lane. She has to physically...
Can you get to the question, please?
Why won't the rubbish trucks come down Dianella Lane? What will it take to get lights put up there and put out the back? And why has her street trading permit gone up 25%? She thinks it's really high with the cost of living, and she doesn't know how she's going to continue.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you've done a lot and brought a lot of questions tonight. Many might need more time because we've just received them. Can I refer over to Simon? Do you have a few answers there, or they need to be taken on notice?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I have some answers to some parts of those questions, but not all of them.
Yes, sir. Would you like to? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In relation to the heritage tree on Bank Street, I note it's... sorry, thank you, Betty, for your question through your Mayor. I note the trees located near the rear of property at 143 Bank Street. I do not have the exact details, so I haven't been able to get exact answers to your questions, Betty, tonight. I'll request an officer from the relevant council team contact the neighbour on the details that you have provided and discuss any concerns you may have about the management of the tree. Thank you. Through you, Mayor, regarding the access of the rubbish truck down the laneway at Dianella Lane, Balaclava. Again, I will need to follow this up with Citywide, our contractor. But on talking to our contract manager, it is likely that the laneway is too narrow for the truck to safely access. But again, I will take this question on notice and come back to you, Betty, with a
Simon, I'll just give you some
exact response.
Thank you, Simon.
Sorry, Betty, this is not the opportunity to go back and forth right now, but you can maybe either send an email or speak out separate.
Email in because the commercial
Betty, if you're not going to be able to follow the direction of the chair, I'm going to have to ask you to move back to the gallery.
No, that's fine. Sorry, Mayor, I just thought
Thank you. Simon, if you need to continue, go ahead.
Yep. Well, I want to give an exact answer, so I will contact Citywide for their response on that. Thanks, Betty. Regarding the tree, St Vincent's Place corner of Merton in Albert Park, thanks again, Betty, through your Mayor. Council is responsible for the management of trees on nature strips at this location. Council does on occasions install root barriers where appropriate to reduce the impact of tree roots on built structures. I have checked our records and cannot find any current or completed request for an investigation of tree damage to a fence at this location. I would ask that the owner of the property in question please contact Council and lodge a customer request, and an officer from our Parks and Trees Department will make contact with him and discuss any concerns. Also, in regards to the zebra crossing, I have followed that up and unable to find any record of a proposal for a zebra crossing. Again, I will commit to following up with the relevant department and getting a response through to yourself, Betty. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
There's one more question regarding a FOGO bin at St Vincent Place. Thanks again, Betty, for your question through you, Mayor. FOGO bins in St Vincent Place, Albert Park are collected weekly on Mondays. We have searched our customer request system and are not aware of any requests for missed FOGO bins over the last few weeks. However, we will raise these concerns with our waste contract Citywide and request that all presented bins are collected next Monday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. That's fine. That finished up our public question time and submissions. Thank you, everybody. Now we're going to move into councillor question times. Councillors, do you have any questions of general nature to be raised tonight? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to know when or if or when Council had plans to fix the road Mitford Street between Barclay Street and Milton, which has an amazing number of potholes. I've never seen it so bad.
Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor, I'll have to take that question on notice. If there are potholes, so we do have an annual program of full pavement reconstruction. I'd have to confirm whether that section of Mitford Street is actually on the program for this year or the coming years. If there are potholes or areas of pavement deterioration, we do undertake fixes and patches to fix those. So we will take on notice that specific question from Councillor Clark and look into what we can do.
Thank you. Any further questions tonight, councillors? If not, we'll move on to the sealing schedule. There are no items for sealing on tonight's agenda. On to petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have one petition and one joint letter on tonight's agenda. The first one is 7.1, the petition Sporting Future of Elwood Park. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this item? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Can officers clarify when the temporary change rooms and toilets will be available to improve, at least in the short term, the facilities at Elwood Park?
Am I referring to Dana? Is Dana online? Yeah, hello.
Hi. Through you, Mayor. The new facilities are due to be installed in early 2025.
Thank you. Any further questions on the item? Councillor Clark?
Thanks, Mayor. It's been a little while, I think, since we've had an update on the Elwood foreshore proposal. Can Council clarify whether the design that's been presented as part of the petition is being considered or is part of the Elwood foreshore upgrade when we get to that section of it, if that makes sense?
Where do you want me to go to? Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. The design, the specific design suggestions that are included in the petition are not covered in total in the Elwood Master Plan. Obviously, the Elwood Master Plan does involve a significant upgrade to the entire Elwood Reserve, but it's not exactly as per what is identified in the petition, no.
Through you, Mayor, the scale of the redevelopment for the pavilion included in the Elwood Foreshore Master Plan was looking at increasing the number of changing facilities, and it hadn't gone to more detailed design. In terms of the concept design that's being presented tonight, that'd be a more extensive redevelopment, including an upper floor that we hadn't considered. But if external funding is available from state government, that'd potentially make some of those things more achievable. But we can look at it in more detail. In the interim, we are putting in quite an increase in the, I guess you can call them temporary facilities, but they'll be quite decent facilities to improve access for all people in terms of changing facilities on those ovals. Some of those ovals will also, unfortunately, we need to do some further work on some of those ovals as well to increase the carrying capacity.
Follow up, Mayor?
Yes.
Understanding that the Elwood Foreshore program is a significant investment and it's planned over many, many years, is there any understanding at this stage of approximately when the pavilion might be done as part of the program of works?
Through Mayor, I've taken on notice. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor, it is proposed, so the program was approximately 10 years. It's proposed for the latter half at this stage, and part of that is due to, obviously, Melbourne Water have works planned for Elwood to upgrade the Head Street drain, so we are trying to work around Melbourne Water's works at the same time.
Thank you. Any further questions on the item? No, if not, I'm looking for someone to move this or something else. Councillor Martin to move this. Councillor Baxter second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
I'd like to thank the petitioners for the petition. I've been a regular user of Elwood Park for nearly 70 years. We were so excited when that pavilion was built many years ago, but particularly over the last 10 years, its usage has trebled, as we heard from one of the speakers, and will continue to treble. And I encourage the petitioners to continue to work with Council and to continue to work with state and federal governments to seek for additional funding so that local, state and federal government together can come together to make a much bigger and better pavilion. So I encourage you to work, petitioners, with all levels of government. Hopefully we can get a wonderful new facility there in the coming years.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you very much. The petitioners agree with Councillor Martin. This definitely needs to be a sort of a joint effort going forward. And obviously, as this council term winds down, I also encourage the petitioners to make sure you establish a good relationship with any of the council candidates all over the city, really, who are running, but particularly, I suppose, in Elwood Ward, and make sure they have a good understanding of what you're asking for.
Thank you. Any other councillors speaking to the item? Councillor Pearl?
I must admit I hadn't been to this facility until 2022 and hadn't actually seen it. And in itself, it is actually quite an impressive facility, which is not that old, but it also shows how much the world has changed since this facility was invested in and built. So in terms of normal renewal, it's probably not the obvious candidate to be renewed in terms of the quality of the building and the current status of it. But what a wonderful problem to have in that a lot of our facilities across our city are under pressure in terms of needs because the grounds that we hold and the facilities that we hold are being used in a completely different way compared to what they were 10 years ago. If I'd been there before 2022, I perhaps would have had a different view in terms of the priority this facility should have sat in terms of renewal under the council plan, given the amount of people that are here. But I would think the new council would be well advised to put this item of works well in advance under their new council plan, and I'm sure they'll get the numbers and support based on the very detailed submission. The mover and the seconder also mentioned the good work that was put on the petition. There were 2 additional documents which had some QC information in it, which was to the highest standard I've ever seen in terms of a sports club proposal in my 8 years here. So thank you to the petition providers, and all the information is there for the next council to easily act upon this proposal.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? Thank you. Got it.
Should have called a point of order.
All right. If there's no one else speaking to it, then let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Now we're on to 7.2. This is a joint letter. Objection to the proposed lane, it's written wrong, lane reduction on Park Street. Is it correct in the minutes? Okay. Sorry, maybe it's just on my paper here. Okay, councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this item? Councillor Pearl?
Yeah, 2 quick ones. The first one was, does the traffic modelling that was done for the project take into account any traffic flow or new traffic movements in relation to the new traffic movements of Domain Road? So the traffic flowing from Park Street to Domain Road. Is it included in the estimate in terms of the works done on reducing the lane down to 1? What assumptions have been made on that?
I'm calling on David. Are you online, David?
Yes, through you, Mayor. There's comprehensive traffic modelling done as part of the Anzac Station works. DTP have this and reviewed this as part of the decision-making. So.
Another question?
And just to follow up, I'll follow up to that question. Are we satisfied with the modelling in terms of the amount of traffic flow that will go through this intersection, and it can be handled sufficiently with 1 lane?
Through you, Mayor, Department of Transport and Planning are in charge of the intersections and control the sort of lights and works associated with that. Council officers don't undertake detailed reviews of the work done by Department of Transport, as it's their infrastructure.
Understood, thank you. And finally, could we go through, obviously there were some comments made by residents around opportunities to consult on this small but important change. What opportunities were there for the public to submit concerns on this design change that's referred to in item 7.2? And how are those concerns taken into consideration?
Through you, Mayor, officers provided a letter out to the community. We received 3 responses to that letter that went out. That was the extent of the change. It was under inform through the engagement process, as the works were sort of dictated by the Department of Transport and Planning.
That's it from me. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Any further questions on the item? You asked some of mine. Okay, Councillor Sierracroft.
Yeah, just follow up to the survey. Can Council provide information of just how many survey letters were sent out to the residents on Park Street and possibly neighbouring streets? And what was the number that went out?
Informed letters?
Sorry?
Survey or informed letters? What is
informed letters, yeah. Just how many informed letters went out, the extent from, say, St Kilda Road back to Kingsway. What was the extent?
David, do you have an answer for that?
Through you, Mayor, I'd need to check on the exact footprint of that. I believe it was in the order of 5,000. However, I'd like to clarify that to make sure the information is correct.
Thank you.
And take that on notice provided to the councillors.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Pearl?
Thanks. If I can move an alt motion, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
So the alt motion changes section 5, which to this wording requests that council officers write to the Department of Transport and Planning, DTP, to 1, pass on resident concerns of local traffic congestion and accessibility as a result of the design modification. 2, request that DTP monitor the intersection and provide regular updates to council officers that can be made publicly available on the operation of the intersection. 3, request DTP make real-time adjustments as necessary to improve capacity and reduce congestion. And 4, request DTP can consider design change that will reduce the likelihood of increasing queuing at the intersection of Park Street and St Kilda Road, particularly for cars turning left into St Kilda Road from Park Street, such as by including queuing zones for cars turning left into St Kilda Road to prevent cars from banking up on Park Street. Yes, let's put it that way.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Sierracroft, second. All right, Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, and in the beginning of it, if I could request, Madam Mayor, we vote on this in parts, if possible. So when we get to the vote, if we could vote for points 1 to 4 and 6 together, okay. And then if we could vote on point 5 separately in 2 votes from point 1 to 3, with point 4 being its only vote. I hope that makes sense.
I think so. Thank you.
No problem. I'll reserve, other than just to explain the amendment to councillors. These are small changes, particularly the first 3, which give resident concerns, they address resident concerns regarding this intersection, albeit it doesn't qualify for the design change of which they're asking for. This is a street that has had a great deal of unplanned change in many respects in the past 10 years. It's the first time that there's now a coordinated design and integrated change for this street, which is generally a good thing, and most residents, I think, accept it. But what we have learnt from our experience in the last 10 years is the changes that we make in isolation have drastic impact on the street itself, but also the interfacing streets also. The debate has been run and won about bike paths on this street and the parking on this street. We get that. But the change that we're making at what potentially could be a significant bottleneck at this site warrants closer examination, particularly on the basis that we've gone through extensive design consultation for this project over many, many years, and this small but very important change went nowhere near the same degree of consultation. We're not seeking to reverse the decision that this council has already made, and which is underway through a confidential decision of council. But this amendment, councillors, gives you the assurance and the residents' assurance under 1 to 3 that the change will be measured and be monitored, and then under section 4 of the change that at least we're asking DTP to come up and review and check their own modelling about what they have of the potential queuing implications a single lane at Park Street and St Kilda Road will have. We need to have a look at it, and if we get it right now, we can move it forward. I would have liked to have moved this to more to a 2-lane scenario, but I don't think that's realistic based on the feedback that councillors have kindly and rather hastily provided me today. So, councillors, I seek your indulgence to vote on these separately, which gives you the latitude to be able to consider this on your spectrum of reasonableness. But I hope you'll support at least the first three and also point number 4 on this alt motion. And I'll speak at the end to answer any of your concerns, which I'm sure you'll raise.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Sirikoff, next to speak. Oh, do you have a question now? Clarifying question?
The question for officers, part 5 of this is request DTP to consider a design change for this. Given we awarded the tender for these works less than 1 month ago, if DTP were to make any changes to the design, would that have any impact on the tender we awarded less than 1 month ago? And who would be liable for that cost?
Brian?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Having considered the way the resolution is spelt out, Clause 4 there notes the decision that Councillor Bond refers to of Council on the 7th of August to award the tender. That process will continue under this resolution, and that awarding of the tender process will continue. What I understand that 4 in this clause then asks council officers to do is to contact the department to have a look at those design changes, but to the extent that they come back and say the design changes are consistent with the contract, that contract will continue. To the extent that they are inconsistent, the contract is in place and will continue. We may then, depending on that outcome, need to consider our options, which might include coming back to council, noting that by that stage the contract will have been progressed. So we'll move quickly, but we are constrained by that decision on the 7th of August.
CEO?
So depending on the nature of the changes of their material, it would potentially result in redesign, variation of the contract and significant expense.
Councillor Bond, question?
And that delay and redesign, would that potentially result in penalties to council being awarded to the person we've just given the tender to?
Yes, normally extension of time and time delays created by us changing designs would be subject to penalty.
Thank you. Any further clarifying questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go back to Councillor Sirikoff. Oh, you have your own.
Under that circumstance, I assume that decision would come back to council for a decision. Would that be correct?
Yes, it would. It'd have to wait for a new council.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. Councillor, no, Councillor Crawford, no? Okay, got it. Thank you. All right, so I've had clarifying questions and I'm going back to Councillor Sirikoff as a seconder. Go ahead, Councillor Sirikoff.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this alt motion. I wasn't really in favour of the design in the first place several years ago and how it was going to impact on the people in Park Street. But unfortunately, the majority decided to go in a different direction. We've now got the opportunity tonight to at least try to fix some of the problems as suggested by Councillor Pearl, so that we get it right now, so that in the future, if there are any, these problems keep on arising, and it's really impacting on the amenity of the residents and also impacting on the traffic management of people travelling through our city. While I don't like the incurring any more costs for any changes, I think it's only just right that we get it right now so we don't have even more costly outcomes in the future, and to try to get some kind of satisfaction for the residents and those who drive through our city. We should do it now before it's too late, before it becomes embedded and becomes costly in the future to change.
Thank you, Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Nyaguy?
I guess the problem is it is embedded and it is costly to change at this juncture if we've already gone this far into the process. We know these processes are really lengthy. I understand that we don't necessarily like every single part the design lands on, but ultimately, given where we are in the process and the possible costs incurred to council and ultimately to the community, were we to reopen this, delay the project and try to do changes, I think we need to kind of push on and accept that there might be some challenges in the future. There's always ways we can fix things in the future, but to reopen this process now is, I think ultimately going to cost our community and delay the project further.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Can I thank the authors of the joint letter, and there have also been some authors of opinions just contrary to the joint letter. Can I thank the officers for their recommendation, which I think is a reasonable one. Can I thank Councillor Pearl for his amendment, and I understand what he's trying to do. I did a couple of dry runs around that intersection myself. I think parts 1, 2 and 3 of Councillor Pearl's amendment allow DTP to go and look at things like traffic light cycles, maintenance, regularly monitoring what's going on there and tweaking the way that the intersection works. I think that Councillor Pearl's part 5, listed as, in italics 4, part 5 up there on the screen, going back and readdressing a council decision yet again, something we've taken, something we've committed to, something where we've confidentially committed to a project. I think that's probably going a little bit too far and could involve council in all sorts of expenses that we don't want to incur. So I believe I'll be supporting the Officers' Rec plus Councillor Pearl's amendments parts 1, 2 and 3, which allows real-time monitoring of the situation and allowing us to alter traffic situations by doing things like altering traffic light sequences, but I wouldn't be prepared to commit council to unknown expenses in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Bond.
I'm okay with parts, was it 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3, same as Councillor Martin. I'm not okay with 6.4 because, as we know, and I've seen it many, many times, the moment we start making changes to a design, and I can cite examples such as the South Melbourne Lifesaving Club, which went from 3 million to about 7 million. The forecourt at Luna Park, the moment we started changing that, it went from 3.5 million to 7 million. We have a design. We've done extensive community consultation on that design. We sent out 5,000 letters and got 3, maybe 4 responses, 3 against, 1 in favour. The other 4,996 people we advised were fine with that and didn't see the need to contact with us with regard to this change. I know once we start making these changes, we'll be lumped with all the costs. It will be the City of Port Phillip that pays extensively to fund these changes on behalf of DTP. We've issued a tender. We'll have to pay compensation or have to pay some sort of remedy to the person who's been awarded a tender, and we're now going to go and potentially change that on them. 1, 2 and 3 certainly do something to address some concerns in this area, but we've made a decision. I think we need to stick with that decision, and it's not right that we sit here now and re-prosecute an argument because we lost the argument over the last 3 or 4 years, that this is just seen as another opportunity to re-prosecute that. So I won't be supporting, was it 6.4 up there, but happy to support the rest. And if there's something DTP could do for the remainder of the intersection there through traffic light management and other items under their control, I'm happy for them to look at that.
Just to clarify, I think I've only been requested for 3 votes. So it'll be part 1 is the 1 through 5. I think you moved the 6 up. Then part 2, that's fine, that's good, that's 1. And then it's just part 2 would go, maybe I clarify, part 5 becomes part 3. Does that make sense? There's only 3 total votes requested. No, it'll be part 1. That's 1. And then part 2 is, yeah. It's 3 votes.
Do you want me to clarify in terms of the request?
Didn't you ask for 3 votes? Yes, please clarify, Councillor.
The motion that was put up is slightly different from what I sent through to you in terms of the numbers, so that may have confused. So I originally edited item 5, which you've now made item 6, which is fine. So what we would do is we would move 1 to 5 as the first vote.
Yep.
And then item 6, subpoint 1 to 3 is the second vote. And then item 6, subpoint 4 as the third vote.
Yes. Thank you. Yep, thank you. Okay. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Clark?
I think it's clearly too late to get this right because removal of this lane is a bad outcome. I have sat here over the years and been briefed on this. It's one of those things that you get to council chambers like this and you go, did I vote for this? Did I understand this fully? One of the many things you go, how did we get here? And maybe we got here because the Department of Transport has mainly controlled this design, hasn't listened to council, or a mixture of the above. But the potential traffic impact of this is clearly terrible. And as for the residents that live around there, I'm sorry for the impact that you're going to experience. We've got footpaths that aren't the right size because we've got to have a bike lane. We've got traffic lanes being reduced and potentially a design that's going to allow for endless queuing. And on the face of it, that would just seem ridiculous. But not everything that we see has much common sense in it. So in terms of this motion, to try and actually have another look at it to get a sensible response for the left-hand turning lanes and to try and make a better flow of the traffic, I don't see how we can't request this. I think the motion says request the department consider a design change. And if that means that this gets slightly delayed by council to get a better outcome of the traffic flow, I think that's a very important consideration that we should support, because the end result, if it is as bad as it could be, will be far worse for us to try and deal with that after the effect, as opposed to a slight delay and then have a full consideration of what can be done to rectify a bad design. So I'm fully supportive of this and glad that, and thank Councillor Pearl for bringing this to us so that we can try and rectify. It's our amenity, it's our community, not the department. So we should try and do all we can to make it as the best of a bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to this item? I will real quick. I think the joint letter points out a great problem about cars being held up, turning left, waiting for cyclists, even though they have an early start, but it's on a hill, and then a lot of pedestrians there. So it does block that ability. However, this intersection is quite long and wide that if the design from the DTP, not tell them how to do it because I'm not a traffic engineer, but it looks like there's space that they could at least have waiting areas, but you'd have to indicate to the traffic that that's what they're supposed to do. Similar to like hook turns, we have the waiting bay. It's different to most places in the world, but it's something that is indicated as what you're supposed to do to move that traffic out of the way. And that's something that I think there's an opportunity to do here. This corner is challenging. The original design had the bike path go onto the footpath there. It's not the widest footpath overall. I mean, it is about 3 meters, but this section is now even busier with being the new Woolworths on the site. There, you're going to have a lot of people moving off this corner, as well as going to the station, etc., that's in close proximity. So it's not a perfect solution to put the bike path back on the path, and it also takes out another tree and is a significant change to the project. I don't like where we're at right now, as in we were taking this project forward, and now the idea of changing it does have some unknowns. What's the time, what's the cost, etc., on this project that delay might give. However, I think that I just wish there was a quicker process and we weren't at this last council meeting to be able to raise this, where we could get that next feedback from DTP raising what can we do in this situation. But it looks like even from a new council onboarded to like the 20th of November, that's 2 months, 3 months delay, yeah? This is a tricky one. So whilst I think that there's some improvement that can be done to this because I identify the problem, I'm still going to think for the next few seconds about and have Councillor Pearl try to persuade me one way or the other on this before we go to the vote. Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
Thanks very much. So firstly, I owe an apology to the residents and the people who have written this letter. I got this wrong and I missed this and I've let you down, and it's disappointing that I did that. So I apologise. Yes, thousands of letters were sent out, but there was not a comparison in those letters about the change that was being made on this intersection. So had we said that the change from the original consultation and perhaps the two parallel options put side to side, we may have received a substantial more feedback than just this joint letter and also the feedback that we directly received. We have an opportunity here to do a few things right. The first one is to make sure that the Department of Transport don't we implement together and then they go away. We need to make sure that the impact that we are making on this intersection in particular and across Park Street more generally is monitored and measured, and therefore any problems that do arise can be addressed in the future from a place of evidence, not a place of feeling. That's a good thing. That's the changes we're trying to make here in 6.1, 0.2 and 0.3. Costly, yes, but we all know the examples that Councillor Bond listed, which are true, of us making changes after construction starts or after we sign contracts, I think vastly outweighed by some of the other retrofits that we've had in Park Street in terms of how much cheaper would it have been to put the lights that we all knew had to be put there when the tram stop was put in, how much cheaper those works would have been if we'd just done that, if we'd placed the tram stop in the right place, and B, we'd done it concurrently. We've all seen the retrofit cost of the Port Melbourne Secondary College. We're about to see the retrofit cost of Albert Road, and also the difficulties that we find with truck movements around the port and also Williamstown Road in terms of pedestrian safety. It's always more costly to fix it once you've built it as opposed to doing it before it's even constructed. And I'm sure if DTP do come back with some options, and keep in mind here, part 4 of this does not suggest we go back to the 2-lane car option and a bike lane on the footpath. That's not what we're actually suggesting here. But if they do come back and say, yes, we can put in some waiting bays which will make the slip-through on Park Street more efficient on St Kilda Road, which is technically outside of the project area in any case, I am very confident that our very talented officers can go back and renegotiate a very small section of the contract that we're about to enter into, and also stage the project to allow us to wait for that work to be done to minimise any costs that will be drawn to council under item 4. Keep in mind, it's much better to fix this problem now than to kick the can down the road and fix it 2 or 3 years from now and leave a poor legacy for our next council. There's also a bit of a canary in the coal mine with the response here in terms of they would like a public transport bus to be able to go around the corner. And I hope this doesn't mean that our much promised Park Street tram link is being replaced by a public bus line. That would be a great disappointment also. So this motion, this amended motion here today, ensures that we keep an eagle eye on this precinct once construction has complete. Hopefully we can work out a better way to be able to construct the overall project, and hopefully we get a better outcome for future residents 2, 5, 10 years down the track. That's what we're all about here. I commend the motion too.
Am I allowed to ask a clarifying question at this stage? Okay, I'm just going to ask a clarifying question. And I know that some of the bits of this is confidential tonight, so because of the nature of a tender. But my question's around staging. I can't recall, and if I can't ask this question, please let me know. But the staging, would the works commence down Park Street closer to Kingsway, or is it starting up at St Kilda Road at this intersection? Because obviously the first thing we're going to do matters if it's this section.
I'm hoping David online has got the answer.
David, do you have the answer for that?
Through you, Mayor, I believe it starts at this intersection. However, I would need to clarify that. But that is my understanding. That's the first stage of works.
Okay, thank you. That doesn't, not good outcome. We've had, it's been closed, so we will now take that to the vote. The first vote, it's going to be in 3 votes. The first vote, if you scroll up, is everything in black up here, which was in the officer's recommendation, 1 through 5. That's all we're voting on this first vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. All right, second vote is part of the alt motion in the red. It is parts 1 through 3. Give you a second to look at it. All right. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, that's carried. All right. And the third part is the fourth point of item 6. All those in favour? All those against? That's lost. Thank you very much. All right. It's 8:10. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. So come back at 8:15, please. Let's get back to it. We finished out petitions and joint letters, so now we're going to presentation of reports. Councillors, we have a large amount of reports on the agenda tonight, so I'm seeking a mover for the following items which will be taken on block. I'll read through them and then we can look for the mover. 8.1, the presentation of the CEO report, issue 109, July 2024. 13.2, the presentation of annual report, Palais Theatre, year 7. 13.4, the records of informal meetings of council. 13.5, changes to planning delegations, 5th September 2024 until the first sitting of the 2024 to 2028 council. All right. I'm looking for someone who'd like to move those items on block. Councillor Pearl to move and Councillor Bond to second. Councillors, you can speak to all items that have been listed there, and there'll be one single vote. All right. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to it?
No reserve.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bond?
Yes, I will just quickly speak to the Palais. It was wonderful to see it opened. The forecourt out the front opened on Sunday. There were 2 shows on at the Palais, one Friday night for about 2,700 people, one Saturday night for 1,100 people. And according to the people that run the Palais, there were no problems whatsoever. It was a much better experience for the people coming and going from the Palais. There was, people didn't crowd around the doors. No one tripped on the gutter. Everyone got away satisfactorily, and there were no pinch points in the design. So congratulations to our officers for delivering that design. Eventually, even though it was a little bit late and way over budget because of changes made by council halfway through the project. So I commend that and congratulate the officers on the final outcome down there.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Make a point of order.
Oh, sorry.
Can I just clarify, are we on the procedural motion to pass these on block, or are we on the actual on block?
This has been clarified before that we don't need a procedural motion about moving things on block. I appreciate your interest in that one, but we've been advised by governance that that's not required. We're just looking for, and we have the mover and seconder for these 4 items. Opportunity to speak to him now. Councillor Martin?
Concerning the CEO, can I thank the CEO for the really, really informative reports that we've been getting ever since I've been on council, and particularly since the current CEO has been in the chair. They are one of the most important documents that we read every month, and I commend them not just to councillors but everybody else out there. And a couple of fantastic highlights. The work on the 6 childcare centres is proceeding really well, and that's probably one of the greatest achievements that we've had on this 4 years of council, is saving our childcare centres and keeping them going. So thank you, CEO, for reminding us of that. For those people in Gateway Ward, work on Murphy Reserve soccer pitches 2 and 3 is underway, and that's highlighted in the report. I also note that there's considerable information about how the aged care reforms are proceeding, and at the OPAC meeting we had last week, OPAC are monitoring things very closely, and it's proceeding probably more smoothly than we expected. So thank you, CEO, for updating us on that. And last but not least, just a little snippet in there, the Solar Savers program. How good is that? Have a read about that, everyone, and see what we're achieving in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Would anyone else like to speak to these 4 items? Otherwise, Councillor Nyaguy.
Just briefly to say thank you to the CEO and officers for, the reports in general, probably in particular the CEO's report. It's probably less informative for me now that I'm on council, but certainly when I was a regular attendee to council meetings back in the past and would attempt to understand the workings of council, I always found it to be a really useful tool to do that, and I hope that it remains so from the community's perspective. It's not necessarily the norm across the sector to have such a detailed and frequent report, but I think it's a really important resource for our community to be able to track progress over time and hold us accountable to the commitments we've made and to the projects we're delivering.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? Otherwise, we'll go to Councillor Pearl to close. No? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move to the rest of the presentation reports individually. So, councillors, the first one is 9.1, the City of Port Phillip Reconciliation Action Plan for 2024 to 2026. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? I see no questions. All right, so I'm looking for someone to move this or something else. Councillor Martin to move and Councillor Nyaguy to second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Very briefly, thank you to all the officers who were involved in the preparation of the report. Thank you to all the members of our community who commented. Can I particularly call out the Port Phillip Citizens Reconciliation and their chair, Rosemary Rule, for the efforts that they've put into this. This is a wonderful document. It's a living document. It will get bigger and better, and I commend it to you.
Thank you. Councillor Nyaguy, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I think it's so fantastic. This has become such standard practice now at Port Phillip. We've had, I think, this is the 3rd iteration, the Reconciliation Action Plan. I really do thank all the various communities, in particular Citizens for Reconciliation, for their engagement over many, many years in these areas. We don't necessarily have the largest Indigenous community in Port Phillip, but it doesn't mean we are any less obligated to make sure that we serve them appropriately and that we continue on the path of reconciliation.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All right, and those abstaining? Okay, thank you. That's carried. All right. Now we're going to 10.1. This is the Johnson Street Park and Signalised Crossing Works in Kind project delivery. This is in Fishermans Bend. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? I just have a quick question on the diagram. It's showing a pedestrian crossing on the opposite side of Boundary Street. I think it's called there, East Boundary Street. Would that actually be delivered as well, where people would be stopping that far on the other side of the intersection and allowing pedestrians across there as well?
Through you, Mayor, the part of the pedestrian operated signal that forms part of this design at the moment runs north-south intersection. The remainder of the intersection we work through the detailed design process and sits outside the current Works in Kind agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation, or any other questions? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Martin to move, and I'll second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Very briefly, thank you. This is a novel approach in the City of Port Phillip, where the City of Port Phillip is working with the state government and the developer using a significant amount of money through DCP contributions to significantly make an increase to our green space, our walking space, our thoroughfare, our bike lanes in the Fishermans Bend complex. I'm sure it's going to be successful, and hopefully it will set up a model so that we can work with further developments to come up with similar and perhaps bigger and better ways of increasing the greening of Port Phillip in a way that's not dipping significantly into council coffers and is going to work for the common good.
Thank you. Even though lots of people do use Johnson Street, it can be made obsolete given the proximity and the other roads so close to it. So it's great to see this area to be able to become another space. That intersection there is extremely dangerous, not only for the amount of now pedestrians coming across the new grocery store, but the cars, it's just such a big area, and the line marking's been substandard. So I think this is a great opportunity to enhance this area and make some significant changes into existing networks. So I'll be supporting it. Anybody else want to speak to the item? Councillor Bond?
I won't be supporting this, as I think the bike lane through this area is just completely unnecessary at this point in time. It doesn't really connect anything to anything. The way it's travelling from Williamstown Road through to the next street. I know it may be earmarked as some sort of future bike lane, but I think we should develop a bike lane through here if and when we know what's happening in the future, because if no bike lane is ever developed along the rest of Johnson Street for a decade or decades, we've wasted an opportunity for some additional green space in this particular area just so we can say, hey, look at us, we built a bike lane. I think at this point in time, with the way that area is functioning, the green space would be much more valuable to the residents who are going to be living in this development now than a bike lane or a partial bike lane connecting nothing to nothing would be to them. So I won't be supporting this.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? No, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you. Now we're on to 11.1. This is the Port Phillip EcoCentre funding agreement. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? Questions? No? All right. If no questions, I'm looking for someone to move this or something. Okay, Councillor Martin to move this. Councillor Baxter a second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Briefly, Mayor. This is the culmination of many, many years of planning, debate, heartache, discussion, community lobbying, blood, sweat and tears. We've committed through the budget process for all the funding that appears in the document here, but the way that what we're now doing is giving certainty to the people who are running our wonderful EcoCentre. So the agreement that hopefully they will be signing along with Council in the coming weeks will give certainty to the funding that was approved in the budget process. So there's nothing new here. There are no sleepers. I've been through the document. There's nothing that hasn't already been on the table. There's nothing that hasn't already been passed through this chamber, and it'll give the EcoCentre certainty as they start planning for the next few years. And as I said during our tour of the EcoCentre today, if the good people of Port Phillip decide that I'm probably had enough time sitting in this chamber, I would be delighted to join the EcoCentre as one of their volunteers after election day.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
I won't say too much because I feel like we said all of this stuff a few months ago when we actually did determine the funding agreement. So it's been called into this chamber. I don't think it needed to be. But yeah, let's just get on with what we've already come to and agreed to.
Thank you. Councillor Nyaguy?
I just want to thank the EcoCentre for all their work. It was fabulous to do a little tour today of the progress of the new building. It's looking fantastic. I think it's going to be a really wonderful asset for our community over many years. I certainly reflected in my last council meeting. I'm really glad that I pushed really hard for this trial of the weekend openings, and I expect it to be a success. I think it's essential that we make the best use we can of the new EcoCentre building. I think opening it on the weekend to enable all the kind of people in our community who don't necessarily have the ability to go during the week will be, I'm sure, a success, and I'm sure we'll look to making it permanent in the future.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Pearl?
I'm the evil reason this has come to a council meeting, so I was the one that called this in. And I did it on the basis that I think transparency is important for the dedicated purpose of this item outside the budget process. I suspect it has the votes, and I'll be very quick in my comments because we've got a late night here potentially on our hands. But the point I wish to make is that the EcoCentre, rightly or wrongly, has received an enormous amount of support from Council since it incepted. And in the last 10 years, over $8 million of gross council expenditure has been spent, with an offset of about $3.5 million or $3.3 million from the state government. that we bidded for, and obviously our project, and we worked with the EcoCentre to receive. That is, in anyone's measure, an enormous amount of money. And albeit Councillor Martin said that it's many years of work, yes, the building is, but effectively what occurred was we went to the state government, got a funding increase for the building, matched by council, and then the EcoCentre, which is perfectly within their right, came to us and said, you've now built us a bigger building, we now need more money to run it. And the core concept of the EcoCentre is the concept of sustainability. And we know nature works in sustainable ways, but those ways aren't peaceful. Sustainability doesn't need peaceful. It's the nature is violent, and so is the real world in terms of having to go out there and seek funding. There's very little sustainability in many businesses. There's very little sustainability in many community sporting groups in the city of Port Phillip. It's volatile, and they have to fight for every single dollar. And this organisation has received an enormous amount of state and local resources in the past decade, in excess of $8 million, and we're now committing to commit more. So my only request is to publicly live what you preach and what you teach, become a sustainable organisation from a financial point of view, and fly from the coop. Look to the leaders like Housing First. Look to the leaders like the Fishermans Ben Gymnastics Club, who receive no direct funding at all from the city of Port Phillip, and provide hundreds of thousands of hours of community benefit to thousands of residents across our city with no support from the city of Port Phillip. You are expanding, and I respect that. We have given you a sound foundation for more than 20 years. It's now time for you to build on that foundation, stretch your wings and fly. Because what you're now doing is well beyond the bounds of the city of Port Phillip, and that's fantastic. Thousands of people will benefit from this infrastructure, and thousands of people will benefit from the increased money that you're providing. But use this money as the pathway for you to become financially sustainable. So when the storm comes, because it is coming, it might be 1 year from now, it might be 10 years from now, it could be 50 years from now, but financial difficulties within this level of government, the state level of government, will come, and pressures will be placed substantially on your budget. And if you're standing on your own 2 feet, you don't have to worry about the whims of City Port Phillip Council's budget decisions. You can continue your great work under your prerogative by yourself. The final piece of advice I'll give you is be very careful of the people you allow to use your asset. Don't be pulled into politics. Don't take that trust that you have from council and the community for granted. You are a very fortunate recipient of the City of Port Phillip and the state government's funds, and we are a grateful recipient of the work you do, but please do not take that social contract that you have in place for granted. If you're successful, I wish you all the very best with the funding here this evening, but embrace sustainability, embrace planning for the future, and embrace transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. And anybody else like to speak to the item? Councillor Martin, do you want to close? Oh, sorry, Councillor Crawford wants to speak to it. Sorry, didn't look over there. Councillor Crawford, go ahead.
I couldn't really let that last speech go unresponded to. I guess by Councillor Pearl's logic, then we should expect every single organisation in the city of Port Phillip to become financially sustainable. Actually, the role of government, local government, is to help support community in many different ways. And you may disagree or agree with the kind of organisations that you think are valid to receive funding, but that is actually the role of local government. And to live in the fantasy that most of these community, mainly volunteer organisations, can exist purely sustainably without any support from various levels of governments is absolute fantasy and actually really disrespectful the way you spoke to the EcoCentre compared to many of the other organisations. A lot of the other organisations pay their staff full-time and that is a business model that they chose to set up. not a community organisation that gives back and functions mainly on volunteer basis. Now, volunteers make our world go round, whether it's sports, EcoCentre, arts, you name it. And we actually need to supply and support organisations with volunteers that need our support. Otherwise, literally, our local community would not function. So I just actually take a bit of offence, Councillor Pearl, at your lecturing to the EcoCentre. The role of government is to support community, and that is what we're doing in this instance. And I think that if you want to apply the rules to the EcoCentre, you need to apply it to every other organisation in our city. So I just hope that my fellow councillors will support the funding that we've actually already agreed to. So it's not really a matter of support, just reiterating that we value the work that the EcoCentre provides to the community, and that this funding is just reiterating what we have already made a decision under the budget on.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Anybody else speaking to it? Councillor Martin, you want to close?
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. You've taken some words out of my mouth, but I was also going to say some of the words that Councillor Pearl used, I would perhaps not have spoken in a harsh tone, but yes, we do need to look at how we can bring lots of external organisations in to support our EcoCentre, while we continue to make sure that it's supported at council, state and federal levels. And I would be delighted, as I've mentioned earlier, not just being a volunteer, but if you needed any help in looking at how we can bring in additional funding so we're not quite as reliant on funding from the three levels of government, that would be brilliant. And if I'm not a member of the next council, and Councillor Pearl's indicated he won't be there, I would be delighted to work with Councillor Pearl with all his governance background and his contacts to ensure that we can bring in oodles and oodles of money from external organisations to make the EcoCentre even bigger and better. So, Councillor Pearl, happy to work with you to support the EcoCentre if we're not on the next council.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All right, all those against? That's carried.
Division required, Madam Mayor.
Yep, okay. Division's been called. All those for in favour? So we have Martin, Cunsolo, Crawford, Nyaguy, and Baxter. Oh, yep, I'm getting live minutes taking here, so go ahead. You good? Okay, and those against? So you got Bond, Pearl, Clark, and Sirikoff. Sorry, I missed the order there. All right, so that is carried. Thank you. Okay, next is 11.2. This is stormwater harvesting and Elster Creek. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? Councillor Clark?
Yes, I'd like to ask, I didn't see it in the papers, is there a way of advising what is the cost per litre of this water that we are obtaining as a result of this harvesting versus the cost of the water that we're currently paying for?
Thanks, Beth.
Through you, Mayor. South East Water currently charge us approximately $3.50 per kilolitre for irrigation, kilolitre being 1,000 litres. The cost to council becomes $5.70 per kilolitre with the construction of this project, taking into account operation and maintenance of the infrastructure over a 25-year lifespan for stage one of the project. However, this value doesn't take into account the monetary benefit of reducing pollution to the bay. If we include this into the equation, the expected cost to council reduces to around $2 per kilolitre. Other benefits such as climate adaptation, ability to irrigate during water restrictions and reductions in urban heat island effect have not been included in this calculation, but are tangible benefits to the community from investing in this infrastructure. Assuming we get South East Water funding for the remaining stages of this project, the cost would be similar. As we work through the detailed design, these estimated costs per kilolitre will be updated.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
So I just want to make sure I heard you right. We're currently being charged $3.50 for a kilolitre. Mm-hmm. The cost of this project per litre makes it $5.70?
$5.70 before we consider the additional benefits, yep.
And can you explain how does reducing pollution in the bay bring it down to $2? Is that a cost that we're currently incurring somewhere else?
So we calculate the financial benefits associated with removing pollution using industry standards for placing value on the total nitrogen removal of stormwater runoff. Nitrogen is important as it can have devastating impacts on public health and the environment and the economy. For our municipality, it equates to a 24,750 benefit per kilogram for total nitrogen. So in stage 1, we've assumed a reduction of 44 kilograms of total nitrogen, which equates to a pollution reduction benefit of over 1.09 million over the 25 years.
And sorry, is the cost of nitrogen something we incur currently?
So the cost, so it's an additional benefit. It's the nitrogen impact is occurring now, and the removal has a cost benefit associated with it, which we've factored into the calculations.
I understand that, but the nitrogen in the water currently does not result in us incurring any cost.
Through you, Mayor, if I can assist.
Yes, yeah.
So we don't have a direct financial cost to council for nitrogen removal at the moment. But what cost-benefit analysis does, it tries to provide a financial value to what are sometimes non-financial benefits, like the nitrogen, and it's saying long-term, they're calculating that there's a cost associated with that. But it's a cost-benefit analysis versus a strict financial analysis.
And if you strip out those benefits, essentially we're putting up the price of our water by $2.20.
That's right.
But I'll just say that one of the costs, an example with the nitrogen is things like beach closures associated with the pollution running into the bay.
Any further questions? Councillor Pearl?
Just on the pollution, so what percentage roughly of pollutants of our total citywide, I don't know what the word is, the total amount of pollution that the city is currently dispelling through the city at the moment in our waterways, what percentage will this project reduce that pollution by?
So this project just looks at the impact associated with Elster Creek and the water coming through that particular waterway, so not our entire municipality, but I can take that question on notice and we can get back to you.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Crawford?
Can I ask, you mentioned that that cost is only for the first stage, so we haven't done costings in terms of once we put this initial infrastructure in, the future benefits for, in drought. So we haven't been able to, so it's only that initial cost due to the infrastructure,
yes,
really.
So
and over time that will dissipate given what we're able to use it for.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. The other benefits like irrigation during water restrictions, reduction in urban heat island and climate adaptation have not been included in the current cost-benefit analysis calculation, but are obviously significant additional benefits.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl, another question? You have a question, Councillor Pearl? Oh, you've forgotten. Okay. I'll just talk slowly in case it jogs your memory. Any other questions?
Oh, that's right. So, has there been any post-implementation review of the previous projects we've done similar to this? From those reviews, what lessons learned have been incorporated into this design to ensure that any lessons we've learned from the mistakes in the past don't get repeated on these type of projects?
Hello.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, we've actually just completed an audit of our Elmer Park stormwater harvesting system. At this stage, the Elwood Park expansion project that we're looking at is only at concept stage, but some of those design issues that we've been through with Elmer Park would be incorporated into detailed design. Things such as making sure the control systems are together, they don't have stormwater harvesting here and your irrigation system over here, that they're all together, things like that.
CEO?
Through you, Mayor, we have identified as well this will be a high-value, high-risk project, and so we're looking at elevated governance structures and stage gate reviews, and you'll see in the report as well that we've got a reference there about working really closely with South East Water and trying to get their expertise in helping us with this project. They have more expertise in this area. We have also discussed potentially latter stages potentially being managed with them. So we're looking at ways to de-risk given our lack of expertise in this area as well.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? All right. We have a councillor's or an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Martin, thank you. Anybody else like to second this? Councillor Baxter. Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, officers, for preparing this very detailed report. Thank you for all those people involved, not just in our council, but the City of Bayside as well, who've been involved in developing all the backstory behind this, the funding arrangements. And we could talk at length about cost per litre of water if we're only looking at the costs involved in harvesting the water. But as Councillor Crawford has alluded to, there are many, many, many other costs involved that are ameliorated by stormwater harvesting. Many, many years ago, there used to be lots of abattoirs on the Yarra River and the offal used to be tossed into the river. I'm not sure they had a long discussion about the cost-benefit analysis of improving the quality of their abattoirs, but I think if you look at the City of Melbourne now, if we still had an open sewer running down from Abbotsford to Williamstown, I don't think the economy in our city would be doing particularly well. So if our bay becomes eutrophied, as with climate change, we get more and more stormwater incidents, more and more eutrophication in our seas and oceans, more and more algae growing in our rivers, more and more green material and other things grow in our bay will eventually become unlivable. If we start planning now by looking at how can we address improving the quality of water that goes into our bay, how we can look at addressing how we can utilise as much of that water as possible to reduce our use of current water resources, and it won't be too long before we're going to be having yet another water crisis. I'm not sure it's impossible. I'm not sure it's possible to put an actual cost in dollars on the amount of money that we're going to save in 2024 dollars when we look at what might be happening here in the City of Port Phillip and the City of Melbourne in 2074. This is just the start of a number of programs that are hopefully going around all around Melbourne and around our bay and right around the world in making sure that we address not just where we take our stormwater to prevent flooding, and for those of us who've lived in the Elwood area, I used to live in flood central in Melbourne, anything that could reduce that is a huge benefit to the local residents. But if we're reducing runoff, if we're reducing milligrams of nitrogen going into the bay and so on, this can only have a really, really positive effect for the future. So yes, costs are important, but I don't think we can actually quantify in dollar terms how much our water's costing us compared to the benefits that we might get, and not just in 2024 dollars, but where we might be in 2074 if we don't continue to address the issues of stormwater and how we use that stormwater to A, save on our freshwater costs, B, save on reduce the amount of fresh water that we're using. Of what's the technical term for tap water? It's got a very nice technical potable water, and last but not least, reducing the amount of those horrible, nasty nutrients that end up in the bay, destroying our bay. So let's get started.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to it?
No, my mic was already on. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, we have set a number of targets about use of water, and we have failed them year on year on year, as we've found that as climate change continues to affect our municipality, we're having to irrigate our fields, our sports fields and parks and gardens far more than we expected with potable water. Which, as we continue on and as climate change continues to become more and more of an issue for us locally, we'll experience drought. We will experience, issues of water contamination, and we will really struggle to properly irrigate those green spaces that people will actually need more and more as we move into that hot future. So it's not just about climate change. It's also there's a basic economic argument there as well. We're spending more money paying for potable water to irrigate our green spaces than ever before, and it keeps going up every year. And the smart thing that we can do, knowing that water is going to be liquid gold in the future, is do everything we can to try and hold on to water that otherwise just runs off into the bay. If it can be captured, treated and used for those irrigation purposes so that we can actually keep that potable drinking water for the purpose of drinking and other things, then that's just a smart thing to do. It's planning for the future. It's planning for our city. It's going to save us money in the long run. It's going to help us adapt to climate change in our city as it gets worse. So it's absolutely foolish and short-sighted to not consider these sorts of projects, and this absolutely should not be the last one either. We should be trying to grab every drop of runoff and utilise that in the smartest way possible, because that's what a smart city does.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak to this one? Councillor Nyaguy?
I think probably one of my reflections working in the state government was that water policy is among the most complicated areas of public policy. And I'd say I kind of knew that coming onto council, having worked in that space primarily in agriculture, and then come into council and learning more about, I guess, the challenges of flooding, the challenges of irrigating a pretty complex urban environment, and then obviously the myriad of challenges with pollution in the bay. All of these costs are costs we ultimately incur. And I think probably, again, the lessons you learn on council is you can often see the feedback loop in real time and through people's lived experience. We had a project I always love to refer to it because I think it's so brilliant because it's us that have to pay for the thing we did. We, in reclaiming all the land at the marina, put a bunch of stuff that's now polluting the marina, and of course the people that end up having to pay it are the people of Port Phillip. The people of St Kilda got a cheap marina, but that cost eventually came through, that invoice eventually had to be paid, and we see that time and time again, and that cost is a tangible one in terms of the health of our planet and the health of our community, but it's also an intangible one. Like, I compare the kind of health of the bay to even when I was a kid, and I'm not that old, but it's declined. The frequency with which we get the alerts now saying we can't swim in the bay, and for anyone like me that walks along the bay regularly and swims in the bay regularly, it's really kind of concerning, and it's an overwhelming problem in the sense that there are so many outlets into the bay and there are so many different pollutants and challenges going in, but we have to sort of start somewhere. We have to also recognise that the sources of water we have are finite, they're difficult, and it's going to continue to choke us. So these kind of projects are really important. They do look expensive and they are challenging, but this is a problem we kind of have to keep grappling with because it's not going to remain easy. We are going to be in a situation where we ultimately, if we don't go down this route, where we will find in future droughts that we just can't irrigate large sections of our open space, and that's going to have a huge, profound impact on our community, not to mention, obviously, the continuing challenge of pollution in the bay.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to this item? Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Such certainty over future predictions of where we're going to end up with water and climate are quite amazing. I think the cost of this project, which is clearly outlined in the briefing papers, has gone from $5.4 million in February to $7.1 million in the space of 6 months. And the stages of this project and the scale of this project are such that I don't think anyone could sit here and say they have got could know where the cost of this project is going to end up. And unfortunately, when we're working in the real world, we do have to take account of costs because we have a very tight budget, as we know, and we can't afford to invest in projects that are going to be quite risky, which the CEO just outlined to us, and also an area that Council quoting the CEO, has less experience in than perhaps other type of projects. So there's a number of risks in this project that we're talking about: experience, budget, cost, and possibly stretching the remit of council, albeit for all the right reasons, but a lot of risks we're putting on a council budget in that way. So I think it would be nice to improve water quality for the right project. I think it's very admirable to look at ways we can recycle our water, try to reduce the amount of water we use for our sporting fields and parks. But a project that increases our water cost per litre by $2 does not seem to me to be good value for money, so I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak to the item? Councillor Pearl? Sorry.
I think Councillor Crawford beat me, but I'll go. Water sustainability is a huge issue, and it really is a determinant in my mind of bang for buck, which is why I'm voting against this today. So it provides benefit, that's true, and in fact I was actually surprised by the amount of the per unit cost of it. I thought it would be substantially higher, as our experience with our previous projects has taught us, albeit the scale of this one's slightly different. We in Australia do things exactly like this, and this is what this council does in terms of small piecemeal measures that don't really make a material impact across the board. And water policy in this country is complex, that's true, but it's not particularly brazen or brave in any way, shape or form. We built a desalination plant because we couldn't dare think about recycling stormwater or sewage into usable water or even, God forbid, drinkable water, particularly when 1/3 of Melbourne's total water, sewage on a daily basis, runs through our city. We could easily connect a small portion of that to refine and turn that into very, very usable water. Where I think this money should go is in the place we do have a proven record for bang for buck in terms of flood prevention. So we know our winter months at the moment are trending to be drier, and our summer months are getting much more volatile in terms of the amount of water that's flowing. And since the very large Elwood floods many years ago, we've had a number of incidents that have been much worse than those events in terms of total amount of rainfall in the days and weeks before that single event, and coinciding with a high tide, and we haven't seen any flood events of any material nature, certainly not compared to what we saw almost 10 years ago. Why is that the case? Because we cleaned our drains. We manage our infrastructure below the streets very, very well, and we have a much better understanding now of the network below the streets and the material impact that has when we don't keep them maintained and the state government don't keep their assets maintained. We should be using this money to expand that almost world-beating program that we've completed in Elwood down the other end of the municipality to map out Port Melbourne, South Melbourne, and make the amendments that are required in those areas. That will have a better impact in terms of flood mitigation. And in the future, we really need to test and analyse the assets that we already have. We have hundreds of water gardens across the city. We have estimates of the contaminants that they reduce, but we have no hard evidence that we can point to every year about exactly what the contaminants were removed from our existing assets. So we don't know the exact number of the millions of dollars we've already spent across the city to reduce contaminants entering the bay. We have a proven way of reducing flooding risk and increasing water efficiency and reducing particularly physical pollution from the bay's health, to improve the bay's health. That's where I think this money should go, because ultimately when drought comes, we live in the second driest continent on Earth. We have extraordinarily historically volatile weather patterns. We have a long history since European settlement of tracking disastrous droughts and floods. I was reminded of an incident in the 1860s where you could row your boat from Boats Moored in Williamstown to the post office in the CBD of Melbourne through Port Melbourne and South Melbourne. There's been incidences of huge flooding in our city. We know We've probably built in areas that we should have. That's where our focus should be. And as many people complain about the state of state government roads, like Dandenong Road at the moment, and Williamstown Road, have a thought for the state government infrastructure that are below those roads. So everybody sees the poor state of the top of the road. They don't talk about the poor state of the state infrastructure below our roads, and also the fact that we don't also know the condition of all of our council infrastructure below the road. So I think this is money well spent, but perhaps not in the right area, because the bang for buck that this project provides versus the project risk itself and the actual outcomes that we're receiving from our existing projects don't justify the spend. So, councillors, I think you'll get the numbers, but I'd ask you to question this fully in the next phase of development to make sure that it is actually realising the benefits that it's putting forward, and to compare those benefits against other projects that I think will produce a much more meaningful benefit. We want a healthier bay, but we also know that fish stocks in the bay have been devastated by the dredging, which still hasn't, our coral reefs haven't recovered from the dredging that's gone on. Water health is a big issue, but we also know the vast majority of water health issues in the bay at this end come from the Yarra River. This won't even touch the sides of the water pollution that comes from the Yarra River. So more broadly, I'd like to see us be more daring in our national infrastructure. I'd be fine to drink recycled water from sewage. We don't talk about the third pipe in Fishermans Bend anymore. That's a distant thought. And perhaps these sorts of projects in the future, I hope, go as a distant thought, because I hope they will be replaced by scalable projects using existing water sources at scale, at real scale, not at very small scale, such as this one.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, did you want to speak to this one?
Yes, please. I think, Councillor Pearl, you might be, we have already mapped all the drainage that we own across the city, and we have in our budget an ongoing funding program to clean out our drains across the city ongoing. So we're already doing that. And I agree with you, it is completely one of the best things we've ever done as a council.
Yep, point of order, error of fact, that hasn't been completed with CCTV in the complete nature of Port Melbourne or South Melbourne.
My understanding is that we now know
point of
that
order,
there's
can we just hold please? Error of facts instead. CEO asked for clarification.
Through you, Mayor, we have prioritised and we've been through significant areas of high priority, but we haven't mapped all of the network as yet, and we haven't cleaned the whole network as yet.
Are we continuing?
We're continuing to work on it. And there's budget allocated.
That's what I'm saying.
And there's budget allocated.
Clarified. Thank you. Keep going.
Yep. I'll clarify. We have budget allocated for exactly those tasks to finish what we've already started. So that program's in place. I'm not quite sure what the argument was, Councillor Pearl.
That's an error of fact, though. That's not true either. So the works won't be completed because we don't.
Thank you. We've already dealt with the item. Keep going, Councillor Crawford.
The argument that Councillor Pearl was just making was all about infrastructure and what we need for our city and what we need for different things. So it's about what's going out to the bay. Yes, the sewerage thing sounds like a great big plan that the state government would have to get involved with, but we currently need a way to capture some of that runoff for better use when there are indeed future events of drought, which again, Councillor Pearl has articulated that we will indeed have happen in the city soon. So again, we're going to a detailed design phase, and there are, as in checks and balances on this project through. That's not a reason not to do it. We actually have to get going on these kind of things because they will be needed. And this is the first in 8 years, the first one that kind of is actually starting to happen. We also have federal government funding, which is linked particularly to the pollution going to the bay. So there are stages that will be useful, irrelevant to whatever other people's, the cost of actually the water itself. One of the things that we do not do, we do not budget for the things that really matter. And we're seeing that again and again. An environment, the cost of cutting down all those trees to build, a new road is never factored in. And then we see afterwards there are reasons why. So it is hard to always capture those things that matter most and have the most impact on our day-to-day lives, and most people use that bay daily. So the most that we can do is, one, keeping our parks green for all the people that live in our city, but also looking to how we do our small bit, because everyone's going to have to do their bit around the bay to make an impact. I really hope, councillors, that you will support this next step forward to do what we've been promising to do for about 8 years.
Thank you. Any other councillors speaking to the item? Councillor Bond?
I'm going to support this on the basis that, in my view, it provides a consistent and constant local source of water for our sporting fields. I remember years and years ago, probably 10 years ago, all our sporting fields were pretty much dead, dust bowls. They weren't in that great condition, but our city of Port Phillip was hitting all their potable water targets. And when I said, well, how did we meet all those potable water targets? And the answer was, well, we just stopped watering everything. And so the sporting fields died and the parks looked terrible, and you thought, all right, great, we hit the target, but our community puts us here to provide green parks and green spaces and safe sporting fields, and we weren't actually doing that at the time, which is where a bit of my obsession with sporting fields came from those particular discussions about 10 years ago. So I see this as very important for our sporting clubs, very important for our sporting fields and our parks and open space generally, that we will have a source of water for these locations permanently, hopefully, going into the future, and it will enable us to provide the best possible sporting fields and sporting services for our residents going forward. And I think we've done that with the one in Elmer Park. The water from there is used to keep the Elmer Park sporting fields and the rest of Elmer Park reasonably green, and the playing surface there in reasonably good condition, much better than it was prior to having the water harvesting there. So yes, I accept there is a bit of a cost involved, and I wish there wasn't, but the offset to that is we're always going to have sporting fields, or should always have sporting fields that meet the requirements of our community long into the future. And I hope this one does the same for Elwood and eventually Moran Reserve and eventually Peanut Farm Reserve as we go through stages 2, 3 and 4, however many stages there are here.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. There's something called Stockholm Syndrome when you're locked in a room with your enemies and sometimes you start to fall in love with them. And Councillor Bond, thank you very much for the words that you've uttered. I fully agree with everything you said. And wait for it, gallery, wait for it. Thank you, Councillor Pearl, because you've been very right in pointing out that we need to monitor very carefully what we're doing in this area. Because if we're going to do all this stormwater harvesting, and if we can't show there's any benefit in reducing eutrophication in the bay, then probably we wouldn't want to do this project again. So how lucky are we that in the previous motion we have finally got funding for the EcoCentre? Our baykeeper and his colleagues are going to be working with us to ensure that they will be monitoring all the waters that are coming through the Elster Creek catchment area into our bay, looking at the effects of the stormwater harvesting, and no doubt will be able to give us very, very clear information as to how effective this program has been, and if there are any issues that it's not being as effective as we'd like, how we can fine-tune it. So look, and Councillor Pearl again, suggesting to us this evening that we need to be very careful about this to make sure that, we're not wasting money on this project. Are there more effective ways? Given that I've already invited him to join me in the EcoCentre next year as a volunteer, with his expertise in making sure that we're doing things accurately.
Point of order, relevance to motion.
I'm just going to roll on this. Councillor Martin, if you could wrap up, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
Looking forward to working with the EcoCentre next year to help us implement this stormwater harvesting scheme, which, as Councillor Bond has suggested, has got all sorts of reasons, for not just because we're going to be reducing pollution in our bay, not just because we're monitoring flooding in the city of Port Phillip, but because we're looking after our beloved sporting fields as well. Councillor Bond, I love you.
Wonderful. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. And some, yep, okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going on to 13.1. This is the governance arrangements, Housing First and Port Phillip Housing Trust. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? That's fine to leave if your items are finished. Thank you very much. No questions? All right. Do you want to move it?
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Pearl wants to move it. The officer's recommendation. Would anybody else like to second it? Councillor Martin, are you seconding that? You got a hand up? Yep. All right. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to it?
I'll reserve, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Firstly, a caveat, Mayor. I'm a councillor appointed to the Housing First Board. I believe, reading the council papers that are on public display here, that although I have an interest, I don't have a conflict of interest. I thank the officers for preparing this recommendation, which makes it much clearer to those people who have been nominated by the City of Port Phillip to the Housing First Board exactly where their responsibilities are and exactly where their confidentiality issues lie. Councillor Pearl, Councillor Baxter and I have, over the last 4 years, walked a tightrope because we've been in two separate board meetings, both the Council and the Housing Trust Forum, where there are issues that potentially involve interactions, and it's been, I think the three of us have managed things very well, but it has been awkward. We've got far more guidance here, and I look forward to the continuing relationship between the City of Port Phillip, the Port Phillip Housing Trust and Housing First working together, and I see from the recommendations in this report that these should improve and get bigger and better, and I look forward to a very, very long and fruitful relationship between both Council and Housing First.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to this? Councillor Nyaguy?
I've got a question for officers.
Yes, clarifying question.
Is the kind of context around the fact that it's confidential that we don't want Housing First to have this advice?
Oh, yes. So, who wants to take it? Joanne?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The information that's been made public are the key findings. There is a very significant amount of detail in the report back to Council and the confidential notes that is legally privileged, which does mean that Council can rely on it and is deemed appropriate for Council to consider rather than making it more publicly available.
Thank you.
Do we have advice on how? It doesn't matter.
All right. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Nyaguy?
Sure. I think this was a waste of time.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak to this tonight? If not, Councillor Pro, you've asked to reserve. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Governance is not a waste of time. It's not a waste of time at all. And reviewing what is best practice.
Okay, pause. Point of order.
I did not say governance is a waste of time.
Thank you. You did not.
Councillor Pearl to withdraw that remark.
Yes, the statement was not governance is a waste of time. I think it was just in general this was a waste of time. So
I'm just saying governance is not a waste of time. It's my comment. I'm not referring to Councillor Nyaguy at all.
Thank you. Keep going.
There's nothing to withdraw. Governance is not a waste of time. It's critically important under the Local Government Act that we act with integrity and we act with the highest level of governance. Now, the public component of this details a minimum standard under our obligations of corporations law and organisational law. I have a few problems with that because minimum standard is not good enough, and being blasé about your attitude towards governance leads to enormous problems. And the purpose of this review is to review a structure that's been in place for decades to make sure that it is fit for purpose 10, 20 years from now. And it's my view that we could do better. And I struggled on my time on Housing First to not manage the conflict of being a councillor, but to manage the conflict between the ambitions, rightful ambitions of Housing First and the purpose of the Port Phillip Housing Trust, which is to expand housing in the City of Port Phillip, to enrich the lives of people that live in the City of Port Phillip, to respect the legacy of the people that came before us and put that property in trust. Now, when this group was set up and Housing First was put in place to be the trustee of the trust, it was a very different organisation, and it has been enormously successful and sustainable in growing its operations well outside the city of Port Phillip, and that's to be applauded. But is it right for the directors of Housing First to also approve, as governor of the trust, intercompany relationships? Is it right for them to sit there and say, as Housing First hat on, I think I'll charge you this fee, and then to sit effectively as the trustee of the trust and say, yes, I accept that fee? That's not something I'm particularly comfortable with. And I think the role of this council, particularly this council in the last 4 years as governor, is getting complacent. And even in the last council. So councillors haven't had a briefing from Housing First in person for 7 years. Right? So we are governor of the trust. We should oversee the operations of it and make sure we know what's going on. And yes, we're meeting our minimum standard, but are we meeting a standard to say the obligations of the Port Phillip Housing Trust are being met to the highest standard possible? And is council, as governor of the trust, satisfied that they are meeting the objectives, and are we testing that to the most rigorous standard? In my mind, the answer to that is no, and that's why this review has been commissioned and why the confidential report of this review is so important to the future council to review its overall governance position and the relationship with Housing First. We should be closer, and we should, as governor, be making sure that that organisation and the operation of the trust is being worked on to the highest possible standard. And that's incumbent upon all of us. I think we can lift our game in this regard, and this $10,000 roughly is money very, very well spent, because we don't want to have a Housing First that works efficiently today in terms of their role of the Port Phillip Housing Trust. We want to make sure 10 and 20 years from now it's still working as they seek to achieve their corporate objectives. And based on the reality of the market in the housing association world at the moment, I would suggest that market is going to consolidate, and Housing First will be a part of that consolidation. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're ready for those changes and we're ready to react when they happen, not to be, but to be proactive when they happen, not to be reactive when they happen, which I think is the current setting of this council. So very happy we did this work. I take governance seriously. I'm pretty confident most of my colleagues do as well, and this was part of that process. Thank you for supporting the original motion, and I hope you support this motion here this evening.
Thank you. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I didn't... What? Your hand was up? Okay. So it's unanimous? Okay. All right. I didn't think you had your hand up. All right, we're going to do it again. Sorry. Guys, keep your hands up high, please. All those in favour? Yeah. All those against? All those abstaining? Okay, it's carried. Okay, thank you. We're on to the last presentation report item. So this is 13.3. This is the Council and Planning Committee meeting timetable for 2025. There's an Officers Alt Rec. So the Officers Alt Rec is up there in red. It's just picking up a few of those dates to be complete. That's the election of the council of the mayor and deputy and swearing in the new council on those dates. Okay. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this? Councillor Clark? You have a question, or are you moving it?
No, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we started in council, we, as the new council, got to decide when we had our meetings, the days that we had our meetings, that obviously fitted with the jobs, personal commitments, all of those things. People had singing classes, trivia nights. I'm just curious to understand why this motion is here setting when the meeting days will be for a future council when we don't know the makeup of the people and what their personal commitments are.
We'll get an answer from Joe.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. We will absolutely be engaging with the new council on the rhythm that they prefer, and they will have an opportunity to reset the dates. But what this allows is for us to start putting something in place that we can then work with them on. It gives us the ability to put in the first few months' worth of briefings and reports while we work with the council on any arrangements that we need to change to suit their schedule.
Any further questions? No? All right. We got the officers alt rec. Would someone... I'll move it. And Councillor Bond, would you like to second it? Yes? Seconding? Okay. I don't need to speak to it. Thank you. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it?
As my old footy coach used to say, you can't change a plan if you don't have one. So we've got a plan for the new council, and then when they come in, they can change it.
Fantastic. Anybody else speaking to it? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Excellent. All right. Do we need another comfort break? Because we've got 2 notice of motions. Okay. The first one is 14.1. It's a motion raised by me in relation to support for food relief services. I'd like to move this. Would someone like to second it? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Cunsolo move, Pearl second. You're welcome to ask any questions now that it's moved and seconded. Any questions for the officers in relation to the report? No? All right, I'll speak to it briefly. We have had a scenario here. Oh, sorry, you have a question. Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, quick question. Does this commit council to the $204,000?
So
in the future, because of the shortfall of the change of arrangement.
She's asking a question now. Tanya, are you able to answer that?
Just rereading it through you, Mayor. It talks about reviewing the provision of the food relief services and options coming forward into 25-26, so it doesn't make a commitment.
Okay, any further questions? No? Good. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
oh,
Mayor.
Sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
please.
I'm
sorry.
so bad at looking on the screen. Thank you, Councillor Cover.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm really been out of the loop, obviously, on this one. Can I just ask 2 questions, please?
Yes.
So there was an amount, I believe, somewhere in the budget for food scarcity. Can any of that be used to help in the meantime while the options are... And the second part was, because I'm a bit behind, were we aware of this? Would this have happened whether we got out of aged care or not? Is this just a change in state government policy?
Tanya?
First question, yes, it's around 51,000 that's committed through the budget that will be used for that. We can deliver that as we would have expected to deliver. And second question, we knew that there was going to be a transition. We thought that we would have a cycle of the next 12 months. So the state government is taking the next 12 months to review this process and had not previously advised us that we wouldn't have continuity through that time.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay.
Yes, if I may.
Yes.
Can I ask, are we looking to distribute that money, that 51,000, then as quickly as possible? And have we got a process in place to do that, how we allocate it?
Yes, it was connected. It was connected with that funding, so that process is available to happen as quickly as possible.
Thank you. All right, I'll speak to it real quick. So as it's been outlined a little bit in the question and answers, is that we did expect it to happen, but we expected there to be some transition as well. So with the cost of living crisis, we're not seeing food relief service demands go down at all. They're only going up, and we're very fortunate to have great ones in our municipality, including one that's opening its doors after a refurb tomorrow from Planet Shakers. So There's a list of them also in the background information of other organisations, but we're very fortunate to have these organisations providing the food. However, they rely on funding. And so this item, although it doesn't offer more funding, it's about continuing to advocate to ensure that these organisations can do their great work and that the people do not go without food. Councillor Perrell, would you like to speak to it? Okay. Anybody else want to speak to it? All right. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, that's carried. Great. All right. Now we have 14.2. This is a motion raised by Councillor Nyaguy in relation to a housing emergency. Councillors, let's see. We'll go through the mover and seconder and then we'll go to the questions. So Councillor Nyaguy has moved this. I think you want to move it as you've written in the agenda. Is that correct, Councillor Nyaguy? Who would like to second it? Oh, Councillor Baxter. Welcome back to the meeting. Yep. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, now let's take the opportunity now to have questions. You can ask questions of Councillor Nyaguy or of officers. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers in relation to this report? No questions. Okay. No questions. Yep. All right, then we'll go into debate. Councillor Nyaguy, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mayor. I won't make a big, long speech, but I guess looking back on the last 2 years and kind of considering all the different issues we've debated and things that I think are important that we should debate, I really think this was the one issue in my mind as I come to the end of this term that I felt was unfinished business, that I felt was an area where I guess I didn't feel that I had tried hard enough to really press to my colleagues how important I think this issue is and how important I think it is that we address it. Part of the reason I chose, as most of you would know, to sleep outside the town hall for the last 3 nights was to, I guess, try to demonstrate how strongly I feel about that. I think when we talk about housing issues, it's easy in this kind of current climate to conflate them with lots of other issues in society. We often conflate them, I find, with the cost of living crisis. And that's, I think, it's an important and worthy issue to be dealt with. But the housing crisis, and the reason I used emergency is to kind of echo our call to arms around climate, is on a different level. It's a much broader and much more deeply ingrained challenge that we face in our society. I don't for 1 minute think that council can be the one that solves it alone. I don't for 1 minute think that there aren't other ways and that these might not be the perfect solutions and that we could do other things. But I really don't think I can walk away from this place, or that any of us should do so, saying that we did enough to deal with this challenge. I think the fact that we are facing basically a funding cliff for social housing funding from the 1st of July next year deeply disturbs me. I think it's one of the great legacies of Port Phillip and the city of St Kilda in particular, but also the other councils, South Melbourne and Port Melbourne, that we've had this long-standing partnership and investment. It's not just about direct financial contributions, it's about contributions of land. It's also about the way that we worked with the Housing Office. We have nomination rights on a number of public housing estates. We work closely with state government on social housing projects. We absolutely have a role in this space. I think that role includes funding it, and that's why I've put forward this motion. We have another role, though, and I think, we also have a role, I think, in terms of providing direct support for renters. I think the fact that we've given so much support through rate reductions to landlords and not really considered the impacts our community are facing in the rent space is frustrating. I don't propose that we do rent assistance of any kind. I don't think that's feasibly possible from a council perspective, but I certainly think providing grants in this area would be worthwhile. But really, I guess putting those kind of issues to one side, we also have a planning scheme that is ultimately something that we are deeply and intimately involved in. The decisions we make around zoning, around approval of different projects around this community have an ultimate impact on how the supply of housing unfolds and who gets to live where and why. the objective of requesting the officers do a report, and really to me this is the first part of a much longer and detailed conversation, is to really put that onto the agenda. I think there's been some really interesting debates from YIMBY Melbourne and other groups over the last few years around how we might look at addressing the housing crisis through planning. I welcome the fact that the state government are doing an amendment, basically doing a new act for the planning system. I think that's long overdue, but I think we also as a council need to be actively thinking about what we can do. I think there are supersized challenges in this space, but we also have a huge opportunity to actually make this city better and to do so in a way that's more equitable. I kind of was concerned, I have to say, when we were going through the process of meeting the state government housing target, how easily it came to us. It didn't feel like we were sweating it. It didn't feel like we had gone through our municipality with a fine-tooth comb to find every opportunity to increase housing supply. It felt like we were kind of walking calmly along. And that kind of concerns me because I know, as most people in the community know, and there's a lot of data to back this up, there's huge jobs and opportunity in the inner city, and there just isn't that same thing in the outer suburbs. And so every time we knock back a development here, we don't have that difficult conversation, and we instead push people further out. We're robbing them of many different kinds of opportunities. So we are part of a bigger system, and I think we can ultimately have a better impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. So, happy to support this motion. I do recognise that some of the things that are in this motion we have debated before. We went through the budget process. Councillor Nyaguy and I tried to get funding in that process. The housing strategy was passed a few weeks ago, and I voted against it. Councillor Nyaguy voted against it for slightly different reasons, but I think largely because we felt it was inadequate, and that council needed to be doing more to set that environment to alleviate some of the issues that we're having with housing at the moment. I think I slightly differ from Councillor Nyaguy in that I probably have less of a focus on the supply side than he does. I think there's a ton of vacant properties out there, tens of thousands of them. I don't know that it's necessarily just building more properties is going to fix the housing crisis. I do think that it's the economic system that we're in that incentivises really perverse outcomes when it comes to housing and treating housing as a commodity rather than a home that is the main problem. And I think there's a lot of systemic changes that need to happen there. But I do tend to agree that increasing density in an area, in a municipality like Port Phillip is a no-brainer. We have great access to public transport and walkability and all of the things that lend themselves quite well to increasing density. And I've travelled to cities around the world that have managed that really well, so we would not be pushing into uncharted territory here. We actually have really good examples to follow. So in the end, it's council's responsibility to take care of all of its residents, and renters get very little from council. They can, of course, access the parks and gardens and public spaces and library service and all of that, just like everyone else, and that's fantastic. But I think the sort of direct benefits and relationship that council has with ratepayers really outstrips the kinds of benefits that renters get as residents here in Port Phillip, and we should be doing more, acknowledging that just about half of our residents here are renters. So that's why I'll be supporting this motion. I understand that we have tracked over this territory before. I'm hoping that councillors will take another look at it. But what I suspect is that this will actually need to be something that a new council, with hopefully different councillors on it, will be able to look at, and hopefully those councillors will have that focus on actually trying to do those things that we have done in the past, like providing social housing, like actually setting targets for helping people that I think this council has abandoned. So let's see how we go.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak to this tonight? Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't be supporting this motion. Whilst I agree there is currently a large issue with housing supply, not just in Port Phillip, but across all of Victoria, I don't believe anything from point two onwards will actually change that one iota. What this motion fails to do is address the cause of the housing crisis we're currently in. And I'll go through a few of the items that are actually contributing to this housing crisis we're currently experiencing. In Victoria, we've had land tax introduced recently by the state government for, it used to be for any property up to $300,000 in value was exempt from land tax. That threshold was reduced to $50,000, which means your average $300,000 property is now paying $1,350 a year in land tax. Now, anyone who owns a property and they rent it out with a tenant is going to pass that on to the tenant, and that's just a fact. That's exactly what anyone now paying that land tax is going to do. That's $26 a week onto a $300,000 property that the landlord is now charging the renter, and the renter has to pay. Now, if Councillor Nyaguy wanted to sleep outside the office of Treasurer Tim Pallas's place to protest that land tax, I'd probably join him. I'd probably be there with him to say, hey, why have you put this impost onto all our property owners, which has driven up the cost of renting a property in Victoria? State government in the last couple of years has introduced the requirement to have electrical testing every 2 years in a rental property. They've introduced the requirement to have gas tested every 2 years by a certified gas contractor. They've introduced the requirement to have an electrician go in every 12 months and check smoke detectors. By my reckoning, you don't get a certified electrician for less than $500 these days. Each one of those items adds $5 a week to the cost of renting a property. So there's $15 a week being passed on to renters just to meet the requirements of your electrical certification, of your gas certification, of your smoke detector certification. And if Councillor Nyaguy wanted to go and sleep outside the office of the Minister for Consumer Affairs, Gabriel Williams, who introduced those changes, I'd probably join him in that too. So between those two measures I've just spoken about, there's $40 a week added to the cost of rental across all of Victoria. And that's why we're in this crisis. It's things like this which are driving up rental in this state. We've also got the fact that most councils have put their rates up by 2.75. Water's gone up between 3 and 4%. Insurance has gone up by up to 20%. Interest rates have gone from 2% to 6.5%. So anyone that has a loan on investment property is now paying 3.5 times what they were, or 2.5 times what they were just 18 months, 24 months ago. All that is being passed on to renters. Like, the landlords are not profiting here. If anyone thinks there's someone who owns a property is made money in the last 2 years. They've absorbed a lot of the costs and they've passed a lot of it on to rentals. And that's why we're in this crisis we're in. But what could council do? Over the last 12 years, I reckon on 3 or 4 occasions we've introduced new environmental and building regulations in our city, and we've all endorsed them. Other than me, I've voted against them. And each time we do that, you add 10 or 15% to the cost of building a new building, and the cost of building apartments and the cost of building housing in our city. It's driven up the price of housing, and in order to recoup that money, you have to charge higher rents. It's this cycle of government interference, whether it's at local level, at state level, at federal level, with their overspending causing the interest rate rises, that's got us in this position where housing in this state is so unaffordable that most landlords are not recovering their costs through the rent, even though they are currently charging extraordinary high amounts of rent. I agree with you on that. And those that are no longer see it as valuable investment are selling their properties. There's properties all over this state for sale, more than there's ever been, because people with an investment property are exiting the market. They get a lot better return putting their money into Woodside Energy shares than they are currently getting from something like owning property in this state. And as people leave the market, the supply-demand situation, there's less supply, increases the pressure on demand, rents go up again and again. And we're in this cycle we're in now where people are just putting rents up to try and cover costs, and then people can't afford the rent, so they're cutting back on all their spending, which is impacting our local shops and our local businesses. It's why all their sales are down 50%, because people are either paying mortgages, they're trying to pay rent, and they just can't afford to live anymore. And it's all caused by, in my opinion, government interference on so many levels into the housing market, and more interference is not the solution here. The solution is for us to wind back some of these things we've brought in. Wind back the land tax, wind back the need for all these charges that weren't around a couple of years ago. Geez, if we could get interest rates down, which if the government, federal government stops spending and state government stops spending, we could bring interest rates down, and suddenly a property would be a much more desirable investment for an investor. And that would serve to address the issue that Councillor Nyaguy has identified here, much more than anything we're going to do here tonight on this motion. So while I accept there is a problem here, I certainly won't be supporting it because I don't think these are the steps that need to be taken in order to address the housing crisis. There's things we could do as a council directly that would have much more impact on the housing crisis right now. There's things the state government could do immediately, and there's things the federal government could do immediately which would address this. And I think they would actually address this if those measures I've outlined would be that we've brought in recently, it would be reversed, and we could bring down the cost of rental, we could bring down the cost of housing, so people can have somewhere to live and can have a roof over their house and have some money left over to actually spend in our local shops, which at the moment they don't currently do. So I won't be supporting this, but I do accept the sentiment you're trying to get across. I just don't accept the way this is being presented, and I don't accept that this will actually make a difference.
Thank you. Who would like to speak to it next? Councillor Martin.
I'd like to propose an amendment, Mayor.
Okay, what's the amendment?
Let me read it out, and I hope we've got it ready to go up on the screen. Could we strike out the existing dot point 5, all councillors have got a copy of this, and replace it with request the CEO or their delegate to A, develop funding criteria that would enable a council-sponsored organisation to consider applications for rent relief funding by private market renters in Port Phillip. B, develop a process for selecting a provider to deliver this report, and C, report back at a future meeting of council with the proposed funding criteria and process for selecting a provider, along with the proposed level of funding support for consideration by council. And there's a second amendment which includes just one preposition.
So item what? Item, you had another one, item 7, I think.
Yeah, but so we scroll up. Up, so insert the word up prior to 2.
On item 7, I think you were meaning.
Very last line.
Up to $1 million.
Yeah, just with the word up before 2.
On item 7, the third last thing, so up to, at the very end, up to $1 million. Is that correct? Thank you for doing that on the fly. Okay, is there a seconder for this? Councillor Pearl? Okay, let me record this. All right, Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
So, procedural question first. Am I speaking just to the amendment? Do I get an opportunity to speak to the whole motion later, whether the amendment's passed or not?
We'll go through that, and then you can come back and speak to the rest.
Speak specifically to the amendment.
Yes.
As far as Section 5, and by the way, can I say firstly, I thank Councillor Nyaguy for bringing this, and I agree with the sentiments expressed in every single dot point. My concern with the way that Section 5 is written is that the councillors themselves have no control over the development of the criteria for the providing of the rent relief or in the selection of an appropriate organisation to deliver that rent relief. It would take several weeks for the council officers to develop those criteria, and I don't believe we'll be delaying providing that rent relief if we can bring this. If this amendment is carried, if we can bring that advice back to the next council, the newly elected council, which can then be responsible for the selection of the organisation to deliver, the way that the rent relief will be processed, the criteria that will be used, the organisation that will deliver it, and the specific amount of money that the new council wishes to put in there. And I have no issue with the 100k that Councillor Nyaguy suggested. However, when the new council is looking at its priorities, it may decide that that's not sufficient, or it might decide that it wants to come up with additional. It might want to put money not just into rent relief. It might want to look at balancing that with money that's putting into the social and affordable housing reserve and so on. So, given that the new council, this information won't be completed by the officers until the time of the new council, it's giving the next council, which I hope will be a progressive council, the opportunity to make some really, really important decisions here that I don't believe should be left in the realm of officers. And secondly, with dot point 7, by putting the word up to $1 million, I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be $1 million again. It gives the new council the opportunity to, look, it may choose to put 250k into rent relief. It may choose to put 750k into a social and affordable housing strategy or whatever. So it just gives the new council a little bit more flexibility to deliver all the things that Councillor Nyagui's put in this motion. But I see that there's a far better governance structure and process to ensure that the monies that we need to spend in these areas are going to be spent in exactly the right way they should, and that the councillors elected and attending the November the 27th meeting will be the ones who are delivering that, rather than the unelected council officers sometime in November.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, for item 7, I don't think that's a material change. I think up to was already up to, so you can't go over it by resolution of council. So that I wouldn't use the word. It's a moot point. Item 7. Item 5 is a better of two not great outcomes in my view. So it's vastly better than what's currently written, and I would be happy to support that into the substantive motion, because I think it's an improvement from a financial point of view, from a decision-making point of view, and where we are in this council term. So happy to support the amendment as it reads, because I think it's a substantial improvement on what's currently there if it forms part of the substantive, and then if the substantive is adopted. One thing I've learned is sometimes it's best to be pragmatic than pure, and that's the approach I'm taking here tonight.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to just the amendment, just the red parts up there on the screen? No? Let's go to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? 5, 6. All right. All those against the amendment? All right. That's carried. All right. So that has now become the substantive. We've only had Councillor Nyaguy, Councillor Baxter and Councillor Bond speak to the substantive, so all the councillors are welcome to join in. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Martin?
Thank you so much, Mayor. To save me looking down, can we scroll up so I can speak directly as the motion scrolls down? Thank you so much, Councillor Nyaguy, for developing all of these, the various parts of this motion. I'm disappointed that we haven't declared a housing emergency nationally. I'm great to see that Port Phillip is taking a lead here, and I hope that our state and federal colleagues will also see that we'll follow our lead in declaring a housing emergency, because that's exactly what we have here. On Friday, a close friend of mine rang me in tears. Her elderly mother has just had her rent put up 30% and has been given 2 weeks to get out, and she was in tears. What can I do as the local councillor? So I provided all sorts of advice, and she's got a stay of execution for 6 weeks at the moment. But yeah, so that's an example that happened on Friday. In the middle of COVID, my son in his share house with 3 students near Monash Uni, they were given 2 weeks to vacate the house at a time when rents were going up. So I ended up with a quite distressed young man back at home. Doesn't particularly like living with Dad, but he had no choice. So I've got personal experience of what this rental crisis is like, and I'm sure everyone in this room can talk about many, many more examples of why we're living in this rental crisis. So, given that hopefully we're about to declare the rental crisis, I need to have this motion in front of me, sorry. Would we mind scrolling down, folks? I'll try and find it here, hang on. I'll wear my glasses, all right. I believe that Council does have a core role in both the supply of housing and the provision of affordable housing, including for renters. The City of Port Phillip has one of the proudest records in providing social and affordable housing of any municipality in this nation. And the cities of St Kilda, South Melbourne and Port Melbourne were national leaders in providing accommodation for people who probably wouldn't have been able to get a roof over their heads in any other way. We led the way. We led the way with those local housing associations. Our own Port Phillip Housing Trust, Southport Housing, St Kilda Housing, who's done some amazing work in looking after some very underprivileged people in our society. We need to build on the work of those people who've gone before us, as Councillor Pearl referred to earlier when we were talking about Housing First, making sure that they continue their good work. And I see this as a very, very clear role for Council. Not to do everything, but to do what it can within Council's power and then work with the other two levels of government. So we've got all three levels of government working in partnership. The In Our Backyard strategy is an excellent document, but I thank Councillor Nyaguy for expanding it. We need to look at what we can do to provide more affordable housing in the City of Port Phillip, and if that means working with the state government to look at appropriate rezoning of land in various areas, major activity centres, for example, what we can do with our planning rules, and I'm not suggesting we knock down heritage mansions tomorrow, but I am suggesting we do need to look at what we can do to prevent de-densification, as we said there, and encourage an increasing number of dwellings in this municipality without affecting neighbourhood character to any huge extent. Borough Charter is an interesting document, a very, very old document, which talks about how we look at heritage. I have no issue with Council looking at that. I think we'd need to involve the community in that as well, so that I don't think the Council should by itself make decisions that totally override the will of its community, but it should have discussions with our community about what we can do to reinterpret that to enable us to increase housing supply. We've already talked about a 10% target in our housing strategy. It would be wonderful if the next Council could look and seeing if that 10% affordable housing target is sufficient or whether we should look higher up. I've talked about the reasons why we should look at how we can support people who are living in private rental accommodation when I spoke to the amendment, and I thank you all for carrying that amendment. And hopefully the next Council will be able to implement that motion if it adopts it on November the 27th. I'll go back to my notes, sorry. I'm sorry about this, folks. Councillor Nyaguy has rightly pointed out that we've been setting aside $500,000 for social and affordable housing for many years. The fantastic developments in Marlborough Street, which most of us here attended about 18 months ago, are living proof of how important that putting aside those funds are. And all of a sudden, we've decided not to do that. We've still got that $500,000 in the budget for this year, but we've decided in our budget process not to go any further at the moment. When I moved and voted for our affordable housing strategy the other day, and my colleagues opposite the room did vote against it, I did say when I voted for it that I hoped a more progressive Council would review the various targets there and reintroduce setting money aside in a social and affordable housing strategy. My colleague across the room, Councillor Nyaguy, is twisting my arm to make sure that the next Council now does that, and we're providing very clear advice. Thank you, Councillor. I'm glad you haven't broken my arm, but thank you so much for twisting it. And I look forward to those people who are campaigning for Council to give their commitments to supporting this motion if it's carried by this Council, so that people out there can ask the intending councillors where they stand on looking at rent relief in Port Phillip, looking at the provisional and social affordable housing, and make decisions about who they want to represent them based on, amongst other things, their reaction to the housing crisis that we're about to declare. So, Councillor Nyaguy, thank you so much for bringing this motion to our attention. And Councillor Baxter, thank you so much for seconding it.
Thank you. Who would like to speak to it next? Councillor Sirkoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Many of the points put forward in this motion have already been dealt with in earlier motions or are not the responsibility of local council. It is the responsibility of both the state and federal governments to provide public, social and affordable housing. This is happening now with the federal government's big build in Port Melbourne with Barrack Beacon Apartments and also in South Melbourne with the Emerald Hill Public Housing redevelopment. The South Melbourne Structure Plan and Fishermans Bend planning scheme already addresses the 10% social and affordable housing which council has briefed councillors on numerous times, and we've agreed to. At the 17th of July council meeting of this year, council officers responded to a motion regarding private renters facing rental distress. In that recommendation, council reported, and I will list a number of those recommendations by the officers: the availability of established state government emergency rate relief program. There is the availability of established state government emergency rental relief programs which are currently administered by local external agencies, particularly the Private Rental Assistance Program and Rental Stress Support packages. Council, in consultation with our partnering agency Launch Housing, was advised Council does not replicate current emergency rental relief efforts such as the PRAP and RWSP I just mentioned. Council maintains a dedicated website page to affordable housing information, including tenancy assistance and support. Officers will continue to direct people to suitable services and support will support them. For the 24-25 Council Plan and Budget, additional funding for private legal services was not available in the budget. In 25-26, Council would advocate for investment in rental supply and affordability, which is a state responsibility. That has come back from the officers. It is a state responsibility. They also said that extending welfare supports around rental assistance is a federal responsibility, not a council responsibility. Only last weekend, the federal government announced that it will be increasing rent assistance by 10% on the 20th of September to deal with the cost of living crisis. So that is state and federal governments which are taking responsibility, not council. It's not our remit. While council does not fund any private rental support in the municipality, support is available to eligible residents through Launch Housing, including residents in Port Phillip. Launch Housing has indicated relief packages averaging around $4,000 per household per annum, and they have a limit of $7,000 per household per annum. Council currently contributes $74,521 per annum to Southport Community Legal Service to provide legal advice, assistance and referrals to approximately 500 service users per annum that live, study or work in the City of Port Phillip. Council does not need to duplicate state or federal government responsibilities of social and affordable housing, nor the following resources for private renters. Councillors were provided back in June, before the 24-25 budget, a list of support by the state and federal governments. They were provided this list, and they include Australian Government Rental Assistance, the Tenants Victoria, which promotes and protects the rights of renters in Victoria, tenancy issues and legal support, where if you are having problems with residential rental with your residential rental provider or real estate agent, they will assist you in trying to sort things out. The Victoria Legal Aid provides free legal information and education and legal services, such as advice and representation for people who meet eligibility criteria based on financial situations. Consumer Affairs Victoria has a renter's guide. Tenants Unit of Victoria. This is a community legal centre which provides free quality legal information, advice and representation, casework and education. So the list goes on. So there are many resources for our tenants, renters, that they can access these resources from the state and federal government. In this motion, there is not one mention of the role of the failure of the state government, which is principally responsible for housing supply. What I do support is a call of action to the state government to do more and do better for renters and those who need social and affordable housing, and stop the cost shifting to council.
Thank you. Who would like to speak to it next? Councillor Clark.
Councillor Nyaguy suggested that he wanted one more option to try and convince his colleagues and impress upon them the need for this. I must have missed the phone call to discuss it because the first I saw of it was in the papers. So this has been discussed, as Councillor Baxter said, at the budget, at a separate motion, and now we're back here again in September, which does make me question why it's come back again at this time of the year. There is a shopping list of suggestions here. I'm not supportive of council providing funding, whether it's the amended version or any other version of it. And it's for a new council to determine budget commitments and things like that, as we have already debated previously. I read an article that outlined that 40 to 45% of the cost of developing housing is state government taxes. And I've sat here and seen council pass further measures that also add cost to the cost of housing, at the same time discussing why we want to make it more affordable. So multiple levels of government are responsible for how expensive it is to build housing and why it isn't being built. And this is largely pretty much all a state government responsibility. So I think this goes way beyond council's remit. So I won't be supporting this motion, but it's the same motions that we've already voted down, I think, previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak to it next? Councillor Crawford, are you not frozen? Okay. Pardon? No? Okay. All right. Pardon? Yeah, she's moving. Okay. The screen I have is quite small.
I'll speak. Can you hear us, Councillor Crawford? Yep. No.
Okay.
We were just talking about you. I don't have an issue with this motion in that I think we should always be talking about housing. And if anything, the first point understates it. It's not an emergency; it's a catastrophe. And we've moved motions in the past on climate, which I think Councillor Copsey did, and we moved an economic emergency during COVID, which Councillor Brand did as his motion, substantive motion. And if anything, it's an understatement. We all agree on that, and I respect what you've done here this week and to bring this. I think we could have been a bit more collegial in the way we did it in terms of garnering support, etc., but let's not go down that route. But it's a conversation we need to have. And the latest data from the ABS spells that out. And it's been a dirty little secret, which I think has been swept under the rug for a very long time, which I've been trying to bring to the surface, that we've been fed forecast of booming growth in our city, but instead we're watching our communities close to the CBD, including City of Port Phillip, decline. And we need to do something about this, or we're going to pay the price. So whilst the outer suburbs are expanding rapidly, our inner city areas, including Port Phillip, are losing their lifeblood, and that is people. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the future of our local economies and the vibrancy of our streets. The decline in population has the potential to seriously hurt our local economy, and as people leave and young families are pushed out to distant suburbs, the demand for local businesses dwindle, shops close, services disappear, and what's left is a diminishing quality of life for everybody. We need to get serious about housing at all levels in government and urban development, and rapidly increasing property taxes, unsustainable development contributions for new builds, and delays in public transport initiatives are shrinking rental supply in our city and stalling new developments in critical areas such as Fishermans Bend in Port Melbourne. If we don't address these issues, the exodus from our city will only continue and our population will decrease. When I first joined council, we were meant to be crossing 142,000 people in our population by now. We're well off. It wasn't a target, it was a forecast. We've got to pull our heads out of the sand. The City of Port Phillip needs to lead the charge in reversing this population decline trend in the inner city areas, working hand in hand with the state and federal governments, community groups and businesses. If we don't, our community, as we know it, could become a shadow of its former self and will fail the next generation of Australians. Now, as I said before, I think we all agree with the motion that we're dealing with here today in that it's a crisis, and it's an intergenerational crisis that we've seen before in our city, but it's different this time around. And the reason it's different is we've never seen a situation where our population is declining in areas where everything tells you it should be increasing. There should be thousands of people moving into Fishermans Bend, but they're not because of green and red tape. The green tape sits around 5-star ratings for buildings over 5,000 square metres and even 6-star ratings. As I said before, purple pipes in buildings that don't connect to anything so they can increase their environmental star ratings. That is paid for by people that can least afford it. And we all want great design outcomes, we all want great environmental outcomes, but that comes at a cost. There are developments in Fisherman's Bend right now where if there was a reduction in the developer contributions on those sites, they'll become economically viable. We know that for a fact, so there'll be much more construction. There's plenty of examples in our city where there's development opportunities, and it's referenced to in this motion, that we need to look at in terms of substantially increasing the yield in areas that will be very uncomfortable for people that live there at the moment. And councils and the state government need to head that challenge head on. And the recent targets, albeit they're nice to have targets, have no real firm roadmap about what councils have to do to achieve those targets and make sure they're in place. But ultimately, the root cause of the issue of this crisis is supply side, and a lot of that has been government intervention at all levels. It's an unfair tax system in many respects at the federal level that disproportionately taxes a dwindling middle class. And the middle class seems to be a fact of history. The middle class, I don't think, really existed anywhere outside the United States pre-World War II, and that has been the engine and powerhouse of growth of this country since World War II. And our tax system at the moment does nothing but to screw middle income earners, makes it unaffordable for them to have housing, and pushes them into low income earning areas where we know if you don't have security of housing and you do not have a well-paying job, you will become homeless. So it beggars belief that the income system, which has always screwed young people in terms of taxation system over history, is continuing to do so at a rate which is disproportionately impacting middle and income earners that can afford to pay, in many respects, higher amounts of tax. That is slightly controversial for some, it's perfectly logical for me. We all want lower taxes, but at the end of the day, increased taxes on properties, increased taxes on development means that first home buyers get screwed, renters get screwed, and the housing supply dwindles. That is the root cause of the issue. And whilst I respect the motion here this evening, I don't think it's going to solve the problems that we face here in the city of Port Phillip regarding the dwindling population that is decreasing and the lack of development yield that we're seeing in the existing key activity centres. So I commend you, Councillor, for the passion and foresight you have around this issue, and I wish you well in terms of keeping to push it, but we, in many respects, disagree, unfortunately, on the root cause of the issue and the solutions to the issues. But where we are completely united is that no level of government is doing enough to solve this problem, and the more debates like this we have at every level of our community is a good thing and will strengthen us moving us forward. So thank you very much for bringing this here this evening, and I've enjoyed listening to my fellow councillors and the ones that are going to come after me in terms of their perspectives and ideas on how to solve this enormous problem, because God forbid the next generation are desperately wanting us to do it for them.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. All right, I guess I'll go next. So appreciate the many different views that we've had tonight. I'm currently renting, and recently we were about to get kicked out because they were wanting to sell. So I felt the emotions I think are behind a lot of these, the fear and that worry about being displaced. It's really overwhelming. So I have a lot of respect for renters who don't have that security of housing and in a situation where it feels even less secure day by day. The discussion tonight about green tape, etc., I think there are some that are excessive, but in general the housing stock is very poor in Australia, and the amount that people pay in bills, you kind of have to look at a higher quality building and the rent versus the bills. I think there's a lot of competition there, and a better quality building will, in the long term, be the better solution. There's maybe some semantics. I would have said it's a housing crisis, not a housing emergency, but maybe you've convinced me that I'm not seeing it the same way. I understand there's definitely an issue here. I felt very blindsided by this notice of motion, though. I only heard about it after someone brought it up to me, much later after the papers went out. The way council works is you need majority of the 9 councillors. So I'm not sure what conversations have gone on behind the doors, but perhaps we together could have come out with a solution that would have gotten the outcome that was being sought here. I really think you've blindsided us, and it's so unfair. Council is doing things in the space as well, maybe not as much as we could possibly do with what's been amended here for item 5 coming back through the process, but for example, the library right now, so people know, are doing the Know Your Rights Tenancy Law information session. There's another one coming up. We've already had one, but another one coming up next week. We want to help people. It's not that we're doing nothing. It's just that there's always more we could be doing. I think this topic should be discussed at the next council, because the funding is going through this financial year, but yes, it is ending. I very much note that. And we have been fortunate to have the funds in that to support some really good projects that are not our projects, but we were able to contribute to them and make sure they kept going, like the Common Ground project, Marlborough Street, through either property or through funds, for 2 recent examples. So having money in a fund like this does make sense. I think it's a good option for deliberate engagement, whether it might be multifaceted, that it might just be about how much that fund is and how it's done, etc., but also around the points of item 3 here, where it's from a zoning point of view and planning. We've done a little bit in our more recent housing strategy, but maybe it has to be a little bit more neighbourhood, going do you believe in this? How about if we implement this in areas that have a little bit more heritage overlay right now? What would that mean? Bringing our community along for the ride in a different setting than putting out a strategy or policy and asking for feedback that maybe some people would take the time, but probably needs more hours of contact to flush this out a bit more. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to vote on this, which I know it's coming quickly, because I agree with some of it. I just think it could have been discussed with councillors, discussed with officers a little bit more to make sure that it's appropriate going into an election and for a new council, all the things that we're signing up others for. Yeah, so I'm still thinking. Anybody else want to speak to it? I think it's just Councillor Crawford and then Councillor Nyaguy to finish. No, not speaking to it. Councillor Nyaguy, would you like to close?
I feel like, as the case is with all these debates, Mayor, it's now my chance to either be conciliatory or not conciliatory in trying to get your vote, but that's okay. I guess, there's lots of points that have been made. I think I did follow the due process. I submitted the motion on time. It's been difficult to have these conversations on council. I think I've tried at various points in different ways, and yet we find ourselves here yet again. I guess ultimately I just encourage you all to support this motion.
Thank you. All right, it's time for the vote. All those in favour? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? All right, that's lost. Yep, okay. 4. Okay, we've got Councillor Martin, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Nyaguy and Councillor Baxter. And against, we've got Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Cunsolo, and Councillor Clark. That's lost. Division was called by Councillor Martin. All right, thank you, councillors. On to reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do you have any reports from councillor delegates? Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. As one of our representatives on Housing First have appointed a new CEO. Her name is Jan Berryman. I believe she's already reached out to council officers. I've had a 90-minute one-on-one with her. She's very passionate about the first pillar of Housing First, which is residents first. She's very, very keen, as Councillor Pearl alluded to earlier today, to work very closely with her opposite numbers here at council, as is the new board chair, Emmanuel Sarkis, at Housing First as well. So I think this is an excellent move that Housing First have made, an excellent new CEO. I'm looking forward to very, very positive relationships between Housing First and the City of Port Phillip.
Councillor Pearl.
Multi-faith network has been working hard for the past few meetings, and it's hit the road. So to increase engagement with members and to also deepen our relationships, we've spent our last 2 meetings on the road visiting the Hare Krishna Temple in Albert Park and being welcomed there, and also to Planet Shakers in South Melbourne. Between those two faith-based organisations, they probably we did a rough calculation, 22,000 people a week into our city to obviously express their faith, but they also bring their wallets with them and spend a lot of money also, we hope. So the multi-faith network is going strong, and I think those 2 community organisations and the 3 other community organisations that have also indicated that in the future we'll be holding meetings at their places also. But it does show that there's certain elements of our community that are struggling in the faith network at the moment, particularly the Jewish community, but they're being well supported by your multi-faith network, which is working well.
Thank you. Any other councillor delegate reports? Councillor Martin again.
We had our last Older Persons Advisory Committee meeting for the term of this council the other day. We had a very detailed report from council officers about the implementation of the aged care reforms, and I have to say the Older Person Advisory Committee has been very, very supportive of council officers and providing them with lots and lots of advice. And I'm hoping that there will be at least some sort of informal arrangement between our older people and the respective council officers in the time when that committee is not operating, because it's really, really important that our council officers know what's going on out in the community with the rollout of these very, very important aged care reforms, and that we get them right. And the best people to do this are the members of the Older Persons Advisory Committee. So through you, CEO, thank you to the officers who've been briefing OPAC on a monthly basis, very detailed, very informative briefings. And the OPAC members have been providing very, very detailed feedback back to those officers, so it's been a great partnership.
I'll get there. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. So, are there any urgent items of business? No. We're moving on to confidential matters. Councillors, we have 8 confidential reports listed on the agenda, being 17.1 property matter, 17.2 strategic property matter, 17.3 public open space potential acquisition, 17.4 Lagoon Reserve redevelopment stage 2 pavilion contract award, 17.5 award of electrical maintenance services panel contract, 17.6 which is specialized pressure cleaning maintenance service contract, 17.7 Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, 17.8 the Audit and Risk Committee independent member appointment. I now call upon a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public to consider the confidential items. Thank you, Councillor Bond, and seconded by Councillor Pearl. Council will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. We will now conclude the public part of the meeting. I advise members of the public that there are no further open items to be discussed. This will be the conclusion of the public meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight.